The Simpsons is famous for foreseeing things. But how about a lovely robot that wanders around the designated planet collecting trash? Yep, I'm talking about the 2008 Pixar movie WALL-E. It's set in the distant future. WALL-E eventually meets Eve, and they go on this amazing adventure together. The movie draws an alarmingly accurate prediction of what the future of humanity could look like. Let's see some of the predictions that have actually come true. In the movie, WALL-E's rocket ship breaks through hundreds of satellites to reach space. It was an on-point depiction. In 2008, it was less than 1,000, but now the number of active satellites in Earth's orbit is close to 8,000. A perfect real-life example of this scenery is SpaceX's Starlink satellites. You know, those satellites that are launching to provide the internet worldwide? Well, they photobombed astronomers' observing sessions. These satellites have reflected surfaces that shine in the night sky when sunlight hits them. And it's not just SpaceX doing this. Astronomers were already shocked by the first Starlink launch, but now they're really worried because this could mess up their research and observations. Imagine building this billion-dollar telescope that's supposed to revolutionize our understanding of the universe, only to have its view blocked by thousands of streaking satellites. Astronomers are trying to figure out how to deal with it. They're talking with SpaceX and exploring options like painting the satellites black to reduce their reflectivity, but it's not easy. Now, there's a funny coincidence. The spacecraft featured in the movie on which WALL-E embarks bears the name Axiom. Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, used the name Axiom Mission 1 for their first-ever space tourism journey. WALL-E got our dependence on technology right too. Remember how everyone in the movie was glued to their phones? Well, look around you. We're always on our phones, relying on them for everything, from social media to navigation. The average American spends around 7 hours looking at a screen daily. And cleaning robots? They exist now. We have all these fancy cleaning bots like Roomba and Roborock that can vacuum and mop our floors. But there's something bright too, recycling robots, just like WALL-E. There are companies developing robots that can sort and recycle waste materials. They may not be as cute as WALL-E, but they're getting the job done. Take Zen Robotics, for example. They're all about robotic recycling technology, and they have created robots to help us with waste sorting. The director of the movie, Andrew Stanton, said in an interview that he was kind of upset that the movie had gotten some things right about the predictions. He explained that he wasn't really trying to predict the future, but rather create a believable world where we could empathize with WALL-E's journey. He wanted us to understand why the character was all alone and make us care about him. The director said that he was inspired by the legendary Steve Jobs. He was literally one of the first people to see the iPhone before it was shown to the rest of the world. Oh, and let's not forget about the crazy amount of advertisements we're bombarded with every day. Social media, billboards, TV, you name it. Brands collect our information and behaviors to target us with specific products. Within the world of WALL-E, the spaceship where humans reside is meticulously designed to ensure their constant entertainment and consumption of products exclusively from By and Large. This company holds complete control over everything in this dystopian universe. This company that takes humans into space is a retailer. Sound familiar? Amazon, maybe? While we don't have one evil mega company like By and Large taking over the world, some huge companies dominate the market. They keep merging and growing. For example, back in 2011, Tencent kicked things off by acquiring Riot Games, and since then, it's been on a shopping spree, snatching up international game studios. It's like they're collecting the whole set. The days of heartfelt handwritten letters and romantic phone calls have faded away, replaced by short, abbreviated messages that barely resemble proper language. Well, WALL-E took it a step further. In the movie, large, obese humans travel in pod-like cars. They sip giant bottles from By and Large, and again, basically, it depicts people living in a corporate-controlled world. Well, it also depicts future humans who have become so overweight that they rely on flying chairs to get around. This vision is also coming alive. According to a study, the number of overweight and obese grown-ups in the U.S. has been steadily rising over the past 30 years. If things keep going this way, they estimate that over 86% of adults will be dealing with weight issues by 2030. WALL-E tapped into the topics like where our trash ends up. In the movie, WALL-E lives on a polluted and abandoned Earth. Humans have left the planet because Earth has become uninhabitable. While we haven't reached that extreme level of pollution yet, it's a problem we face today. Over the past years, we've been experiencing warmer temperatures, which have been breaking records. We now get extreme heat waves, droughts, severe storms with tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods. Now, ever wondered about the amount of waste the United States generates? Well, in a single year, Americans collectively produce 508 billion pounds of garbage. Now, here comes the interesting part. We manage to recycle approximately 34% of this massive pile of trash. The numbers are quite astonishing when we break them down to the individual level. On average, each person recycles around 710.6 pounds of waste every year. That's like giving a second life to a significant chunk of rubbish. We also throw away around 1,361 pounds of trash per person annually. To put that in perspective, that's the equivalent to the weight of a full-grown grizzly bear. Now, let's not lose hope though. We still have time to make things right. We can compost and recycle more, and the technology is improving. Maybe we'll find a new way to cope with all these problems, if enough of us care enough to work at it. Now let's talk about those self-driving cars in WALL-E. Sure, they seem convenient, but the sight of those supersized folks inside can make anyone gag. As Captain McCrae discovers on the Starliner Axiom, these vehicles contribute to a not-so-healthy lifestyle. The once-fit captains transform into chins upon chins, rolling around like the Pillsbury Doughboy. If that prediction doesn't motivate you to step outside and take a stroll around the neighborhood, then maybe the idea of Google's advanced smart car will. It has driven over 1 million miles without a human driver, putting all its trust in technology. While we might be a few years away from cars ruling our roads, it's still a bit worrisome. Tesla and other companies are eyeing self-driving cars, and they bear a striking resemblance to WALL-E's pods. As the story in the movie unfolds, we meet the future humans who have, quite literally, let themselves go. Despite the film's somber outlook, it wraps up with a glimmer of hope as humans return to Earth, taking their first unassisted steps. Jeff Garland's character, the captain, even gets all enthusiastic about growing plants in Earth's soil. The movie portrays a positive future by showcasing environmental consciousness, love, and hope. It presents a vision where humanity learns from past mistakes and works toward restoring and preserving Earth. WALL-E diligently collects and compresses garbage into neat cubes, going about his daily routine. His world is turned upside down when the radiant orb-like robot Eve arrives, whisking him away to the human space habitat. Along for the ride is a fascinating organism that hints at the possibility that Earth may still have some surprises in store. So we can say that WALL-E doesn't spell out exactly what lies ahead for humanity and the planet. Its ending suggests that it's not too late to make a U-turn on environmental issues and our relationship with nature, just like other Pixar gems, such as Inside Out, Soul, Finding Nemo, and Coco. Let's just hope we don't need an Eve in the future.
The Saudi Arabian authorities' latest project is building a city, but it's not just any city. It's going to be a linear one called, well, The Line. As for its location, it's going to be built near the Red Sea. The line is going to be dramatic with its exterior made out of mirrors. Its shape is unique too. It will stretch 106 miles across northwest Saudi Arabia, and it's also going to be 1,600 feet tall. But here's the kicker. It's only going to be 660 feet wide. Talk about a unique structure. The city will consist of two wall-like structures with an open area between them. These two parts of the city will be connected by multiple bridges and topped with more green spaces. The line is also designed to be entirely powered by renewable energy, and it's not just for show. The city will be constructed to house 9 million residents when it's complete, with residential areas, places to shop and relax, as well as schools and parks. And let's not forget about the transportation system running the length of the megastructure, designed to connect both ends of the city within 20 minutes. Now that's some speed and convenience, am I right? Saudi Arabia isn't the only country looking to move its cities into the future. There's another project closer to home, aiming to build a futuristic city in the middle of the desert. The project is called Tolosa, which means highest goal in Greek. As for its location, its construction is planned to be somewhere in the desert between Arizona and Utah. If everything goes as planned, Tolosa is set to become one of the most interesting cities in the world. This megastructure is going to run almost entirely on renewable energy, with all buildings equipped with solar panels and water treatment plants that use resources sparingly. And get this, it's going to be a 15-minute city, meaning residents can find all their daily needs within a short walk or bike ride. Residents will no longer waste time commuting to work or get angry in traffic jams. Tolosa is also going to be a hub for alternative transportation like scooters, bicycles, and autonomous vehicles. But what really sets Tolosa apart is its commitment to diversity and equality. Those behind this project are looking for 50,000 people to move in and create a new model of society. Interestingly, there will be no private owners in this city. Instead, a foundation will invest the money from leases in social services, and residents will be able to directly influence local administrative decisions. Some critics have raised concerns, like how can a city function without taxes, for instance? I guess we'll just have to see if it works. Sure, it's a big project with a big price tag of $400 billion. But who says we can't dream big? Tolosa could be the future of urban living, the real utopia in the desert. Fans of special types of cities also have their eyes set on the Maldives. This potential futuristic piece looks like a floating oasis. It's designed to host up to 20,000 people, with places to live, eat, shops and schools all placed on water. With levels of the sea still rising, more so in future years, the Maldives is one of the most delicate countries in the world. What this city aims to do is to move at the same time as the sea level, making it a more adaptable residential area. The city is designed to look like coral. It will feature canals placed in between some 5,000 floating pieces of land. The first residents are planning to move there in 2024, but the city won't be fully done by then. The project is scheduled to be finalized in the year 2027. The architect behind this project is passionate about building on water, so he put together an entire specialized architecture firm. The capital of the Maldives is now tightly populated, so if you think about it, such a construction will provide a more relaxed living area. Did I mention it's also going to look extremely cool? It will feature buildings in the colors of the rainbow. Those houses will also have some nice balconies too, and some wonderful views of the sea. As for transportation, obviously people will need to use boats, but they can also walk around, use bicycles, or electric scooters. How is this city made, you might wonder? Well, all the units are modular, and they're being built at a construction site nearby. After they're finished being put together, they're towed to the floating city. Here, they're secured to a large underwater concrete hull, which is screwed tightly to the seabed on some steel stilts. All these pieces of construction allow the modular units to easily move as naturally as the sea. The city is also self-sufficient. If you'll live there, you won't miss out on any of the features of a city built on the land. You'll have, of course, electricity, courtesy of solar panels. Problems with waste? No worries, as even the sewage will be reintegrated into the system. It will be repurposed as, wait for it, fertilizer for plants. Afraid you'll get seasick? There's really no need to worry about that either. That's what the coral reef is there for. It'll surround the city, making a natural wave break. It will help the whole construction to be a lot more stable. Human-made coral banks will also be placed underneath the city, which will help natural coral grow more. A plan for a forested smart city is also in the works near Cancun, Mexico. This is no ordinary city either. It's a place that plans to be really efficient with its resources, with millions of plants. All that vegetation will be carefully selected by a botanist and landscape artist. Dubbed Smart Forest City Cancun, it's going to be a botanical garden within a contemporary city, similar to the way the Mayans made their whole civilization. The city will be administered with full respect for the privacy of the citizens. Some data will be used, but selectively. It's meant only to make the city life better. It can help with preventing some types of diseases from spreading or efficiently using local energy. Speaking of energy, this city also plans to use solar panels for gathering the energy needed for day-to-day activity. Since it's also really plant-oriented, there will also be some farming activities to be done. Speaking of farming, want to know the coolest part? Those who live there, a whopping 130,000 people, will basically become local gardeners of those plants. Imagine living in a plant-covered house that you'll have to take care of each day. That's a lot of responsibility if you ask me. That's because everyone in the community will make use of that vegetation. If everything goes as planned, the city will also act as a center for research. It will help with some of the most pressing questions we have today as a society, from areas including healthcare, astrophysics, planetary science, and even coral reef restoration. I don't know about you, but I'm excited about the Smart Forest City Cancun. It's a unique project that shows us how we can build cities that are integrated with nature. It's not hard to imagine what cities will look like in 2050. It's not that far along now, isn't it? By 2050, it's estimated that 4 out of 6 people will be living in cities. Not long ago in history, most people settled in rural areas, so that's a huge shift. So what comes to mind? Flying cars and glass buildings, perhaps? Or maybe a more sci-fi scene. Floating cities are already in the making. But what about flying cities? Okay, maybe we're not really there yet. One thing we can definitely expect is a major shift in transportation. Anti-car policies will lead to car-free streets, with most remaining vehicles being fully electric. And forget about traffic jams. Many roads will be moved underground, leaving more space for public amenities on the surface.
A space settlement floating out there in the cosmos. It's not sci-fi. But, as always, there is a catch. Look at this tiny deserted asteroid. It may look lonely and barren, but if you peek inside, you'll see life blooming inside of it. These days, many people now live right inside these asteroids. It's not sci-fi. According to researchers, we might be able to create futuristic cities the size of Manhattan on gigantic space rocks. Of course, there's a catch. The asteroid we choose as our base has got to be at least 1,000 feet wide. Though it's weird why life is inside this asteroid and not on its surface. You see, we can't really live right on asteroids. That's because we're not the little prince who indeed lived on an asteroid, according to the plot, but because there's too little gravity and too much radiation for us to handle if we chill outside. There are possible theoretical ways to stay on the surface, but it's going to be extravagant. So the only option is living inside asteroids. Nothing screams wildly theoretical like building an asteroid city. Living in space without any gravity isn't as romantic as it sounds. Researchers show that when people spend too much time in zero gravity, things start getting weird. Their eyeballs pop out, retinas detach, muscles shrink, and bones become as fragile as a potato chip. But imagine this: a space settlement floating out there in the cosmos. If you've watched enough sci-fi, you'd picture a massive structure spinning round and round. It spins to create gravity for all the lucky folks living inside. There's an actual prototype of this wizardry, the O'Neill cylinder. This device is named after physicist Gerard O'Neill, who came up with the idea for NASA in the 70s. Now, there isn't a ton of data on this, but humans need roughly 1/3 of Earth's gravity to function properly. An O'Neill cylinder may not be able to generate massive amounts of gravity, but the genius behind it, Mr. O'Neill himself, designed them to spin around their long axis. This device creates a gravity-like force called centrifugal force. So, if we ever get to use that, we'll be living happily on the inner surface of the cylinder, feeling pulled downward away from the center. But, as always, there is a catch. When the team crunched the numbers, they realized that the asteroids would break apart way before they could reach the speeds necessary to keep us grounded. And to make matters worse, most of these asteroids were more like loosely assembled piles of rock than a solid chunk. The small ones, like less than 6 miles across, are a mix of sand, pebbles, rocks, and boulders. They're all held together by the weak force of their own gravity. If you were to spin one of these asteroid buddies, all those parts would go flying off into space. Not cool. However, scientists didn't give up and they elaborated on the idea. They needed to find a way to keep the asteroids together. They played around with different ideas and they produced something crazy. Now, if you were to carry all your personal belongings every day right in your hands, at some point, the situation would be out of your control. You'd have to collect all your stuff from the floor. But you're smart and you carry a bag, right? Well, it seems that if we want to control an asteroid, all we need is a ginormous bag. But not just any bag, a massive, flexible, and super lightweight mesh bag made from teeny-tiny carbon nanofibers. These fibers are like tubes that are only a few atoms wide, but boy are they strong. So once we've got this cylinder-shaped bag all set up, we can start slowly spinning the asteroid using rocket motors deep within the rubble. And as it spins faster and faster, it'll start flinging all those pebbles, rocks, and boulders. And guess what? The carbon nanowire webbing is going to go flying out with them. This bag will be expanding and expanding until it reaches its absolute limit. And then the rubble inside slams into the now super tight webbing. It's like a crazy explosion of debris compacting together to create this massive hollow cylinder made entirely of concrete. Once all the dust settles, you can build entire towns, cities, parks, and even farmland on the inside of the cylinder. This is like something straight out of O'Neill's designs. You can even enclose the whole inner surface with a transparent roof. Outside of this incredible living area, you've got these thick concrete walls that are like superhero shields protecting against radiation. So not only do you have this space to live in, but you're also super safe from any harmful stuff outside. We still don't have this magic bag, as those magic carbon nanowires aren't mass-produced yet. But scientists claim that, according to the laws of physics, a tiny asteroid, like a few football fields put together, can be transformed into 22 square miles of living space. As of now, about 1.5 million people are living in Manhattan, and there are like tens of thousands of asteroids just hanging around in our solar system. You do the math. Seems like everyone will have a sweet spot to crash in space. Building a city in space is no easy feat. The main challenge still is to create a self-sustaining closed system that can keep going for the long haul. You see, cities on Earth rely on a much larger area to survive than just their own boundaries. But in space, the farther away from external resources a space city is, the more it needs to close its loops for oxygen, water, and food. Take the ISS, for example. It's about 40% efficient in recycling oxygen, but even then, its CO2 levels are always sky high. NASA is on the case, though, trying to figure out how to magically turn that CO2 back into oxygen. Once we've tackled the basics, like protecting ourselves from radiation, dealing with pesky gravity, and finding some air to breathe, It's time to get creative in space. Enter 3D printing and rocket engines, the dynamic duo that will pave the way for space settlements. With 3D printing, we can kiss goodbye to relying on Earth for spare parts. We'll simply whip them up locally, cutting out the middleman. We can even use 3D printers to whip up a delicious pizza in a couple of minutes. Of course, we'll need some fresh ingredients, but your dinner might just be a push button away in space. To truly thrive out there, we'll need to tap into the riches of asteroids. These celestial treasures are bursting with raw materials, perfect for creating solar arrays, building materials for our colonies, and so much more. And let's not forget about comets. These icy wonders are like cosmic water fountains, providing us with precious H2O for drinking, bathing, and even shielding ourselves from radiation. Plus, we can use that water to produce hydrogen and oxygen for rocket fuel and fuel cells. So, let's say we pull this off. Can you imagine people living or born in space might end up being different from you and me? Like if humans can have babies up there, these space colonies might develop some cool cultures. They might even come up with their own languages, and get this, they could even evolve new physical traits. It's wild to think that just after 300 years, a colony of 2,000 people could look and act so differently from us. They might have different hair textures, skin types, and even be taller or more slender to deal with that low-gravity situation. We might even develop new organs to protect us from cosmic rays. Or we'll have gill-like structures to breathe carbon dioxide. Hey, I know, it sounds crazy, but these scientists are working on developing these carbon nanotubes as we speak. So maybe one day we'll be living it up on our very own asteroid crib. It might seem like asteroid cities are just too far-fetched, but let's take a trip back in time for a moment. In 1900, no one had ever flown in an airplane. But today, thousands of people are zooming through the sky, comfortably seated in chairs, traveling at hundreds of miles an hour high above the ground, unaware that their luggage is on another plane going to a different destination. Ah well.
You wake up with a start, feeling disoriented. You were dreaming of waterfalls and green fields just a moment ago, but now your body is tingling weirdly. It feels as if you don't have enough oxygen to breathe, which makes you panic a bit. You open your eyes and look around. Oh, you're inside your sleeping capsule. Whew! Its walls are littered with different buttons and tiny screens. You press one of them, and one of the sliding panels sweeps to the side. You crawl out of your pod. The absence of your windows or any natural lighting makes you feel as if you're underground. Dozens of sleeping capsules line the walls. The door leading out of the dorm is made of metal. It looks heavy and unmovable. But once you press the button on the wall next to it, the door opens smoothly and soundlessly. After walking up a dimly lit corridor for a while, you find yourself in a smaller room. There's at least half a dozen bulky spacesuits inside. There's another door in the room. It looks even sturdier than the previous one. If you wanted to open it, it wouldn't budge. First, you need to put on one of the spacesuits. As soon as it's on, the door automatically unlocks. After waiting for a while in an airlock chamber, you finally make a step outside. You look up and see a beautiful blue orb. It seems to be glowing. It's Earth, and you're standing near your home base on the moon. You walk towards your Jeep. It looks nothing like cars on Earth, though. The vehicle you climb into is pressurized, and you can even take off your spacesuit, or at least your helmet, and ride in comfort. If you need to go outside, well, yes, you can't do it without wearing your protective gear. One of your favorite rovers, produced by Toyota, is the size of 2 microbuses and can easily fit 2 passengers and their gear. Of course, you've got the experience of riding it with 3 other companions, but duh, you were squashed like sardines that time. The vehicle can also unfurl solar panels to generate power. After dealing with all the tasks you had on your list, you come back to your lunar home. Unlike your house on Earth, it looks more like a castle. Due to the extreme temperatures on the moon, the lack of oxygen, the constant threat of meteorites, and the never-ending barrage of radiation from the sun, it has to be super sturdy. The thing is, on Earth, we're protected by the atmosphere. Most meteorites burn while passing through it, and it also protects Earthlings from harmful ultraviolet radiation and creates the pressure without which liquid water couldn't exist on the surface of the planet. On the moon, there's no atmosphere like that. The very weak one that exists on our natural satellite is made up of some unusual gases that haven't been found in the atmospheres of Earth, Mars, or Venus. That's why people living on the moon have to take care of these issues themselves. The first towns on the moon were built in craters and covered with protective materials, like plastic reinforced with a net made of titanium and UV-resistant superfiber. The inhabitants had to access their homes through airlock entrances dug into a mound. Bilbo Baggins would surely appreciate their aesthetics. On the moon, gravity is way weaker than on our home planet. And while it makes it easier for you to walk and even run on the satellite surface, even despite your bulky spacesuit, it's not great in the long run. That's why inside lunar bases, there's an artificial gravitational field. Without it, people would have problems with coordination, balance, and orientation in space. Plus, weight-bearing bones would lose 1% to 1.5% of mineral density per month, and there would be many other problems with health. Anyway, these days, along with old settlements located in craters, there are new towns that look like transparent glass spheres. They make a beautiful picture when you look at them while approaching the moon after visiting your family on Earth. Next to many of these domes, you can spot tall sun-reflecting towers. They can simulate the day cycle to help human bodies function properly, as they used to be on our home planet. Inside, there's a breathable atmosphere and fixed atmospheric pressure. The floors look as if they're made from regular concrete, but the material used in the construction is lunar dust. A colony on Mars would cost us trillions of dollars to construct and inhabit. It would take a long time for even one cargo ship to reach the red planet. But lunar towns are much easier to build and maintain. There are direct spaceship routes connecting the satellite with Earth, and you need just 3 days to travel between these 2 points. That's one of the reasons the colonies on the moon are growing, developing, and changing non-stop. When people first came to the moon with the intention of building settlements, their main concerns were producing energy and getting oxygen and water for a comfortable life. Now, you have trash can-sized nuclear reactors that provide the towns on the moon's surface with steady power. Plus, in some regions of the satellite, for example near the South Pole, there is near constant sunlight, which is great for getting solar power. That's one of the reasons why most lunar settlements are built in that area. Another thing that makes colonizing the moon easier is its ice. People living on the satellite use it to make hydrogen-oxygen rocket propellant. The main way to get the raw material is by using the regolith and ice drill for the exploration of new terrains. That's a piece of equipment designed for drilling in ice-cemented regolith and rock. This fuel is then used for cargo and passenger ships coursing between Earth and the moon. Right now, people are trying to derive oxygen and other useful products from lunar soil. More than 40% of the lunar crust is composed of oxygen. Of course, it's bound up in minerals in combination with other elements. These compounds are called oxides. You might have heard of quartz, aka silicon dioxide. It's the second most common mineral in Earth's crust. To move from one lunar town to another, you use moon Ubers, taxiing people and cargo. They're also called all-terrain hex-limbed extraterrestrial explorers, or athletes. They have 6 limbs that can grip cargo and roll or step over obstacles. Plus, they can switch out quick connect gripping and digging tools if you need them. They also carry people to and from launch pads, acting as lunar airport shuttles. But lunar towns aren't just placed where people live. They're innovative research hubs both for industry and science. They're also a popular tourist destination. Plus, people living there are tirelessly working on developing and constructing a special base for future Mars missions and the exploration of distant space. But let's have a look at how it all started. For instance, how the first lunar bases were built. Private landers descended on the surface of the moon and deployed inflatable modules, each around 4 stories tall. They served as residential areas, workspaces, industrial sites, and scientific labs. But those modules couldn't completely protect their inhabitants from harmful radiation, temperature swings, and the strikes of micrometeorites. So, people developed robots that could 3D print protective shells around each inflatable module. They used readily available regolith taken from the surface of the moon. It took the robots about 3 Earth months to finish solid domes. Some of these settlements were later connected with one another through a series of walkways linked to airlocks in each dome. At the same time, some of the towns remained separated, like those constructed in craters. When you visit Earth, you often look up at the sky, searching for your new home. Some of the lunar bases are visible if you're looking at them through a telescope. Others, partially hidden underground or covered with lunar rocks and soil for better protection, are almost impossible to spot. Let's talk about cyberpunk, a really cool genre of science fiction that started in the early 1980s. Its pioneer writers were really interested in how technology was changing society, especially with all the digital evolution happening at that time. One of the writers, Bruce Sterling, wrote an introduction to a book called Mirror Shades, which was like a guide to cyberpunk. He said that this genre is all about looking at technology in a new way, not just for science fiction writers, but for regular people too. It's like imagining a world where high-tech stuff and the cool underground culture mix together. The heroes of cyberpunk stories are mostly rebellious people who stand up against big companies and the boring mainstream. They believe in being unique and doing their own thing, even when the world tries to contain their efforts. These heroes are really good at taking things from popular culture and using them to express their own ideas and interests. They also know how to use computers to find out secret information and spread messages that go against the system. These days, cyberpunk themes are seen in more than just literature. You can find their influence in things like movies, video games, and even fashion. It does make you wonder though, could the future truly turn out to be what cyberpunk writers predicted? Truth is, all the cyberpunk literature is packed with mind-blowing technology that might just become a reality one day. Like augmented reality, for instance. Now this might sound far-fetched, but we're actually getting closer to experience AR in our daily lives. I mean, some companies are already offering such devices. Right now, they're mostly used for gaming and entertainment, but soon enough, we might use them for virtual training, education, and even shopping for a new car or checking out a house. Next up, smart clothes. In cyberpunk video games, people are rocking these stylish garments that not only look cool, but also offer some serious protection. We're not quite there yet, but smart clothes are becoming a thing in our world too. You've probably heard of smartwatches and fitness trackers, right? Well, imagine clothing that can monitor your body's movements, suggest healthy habits, and adjust your body temperature. Some fashion brands are already exploring this exciting field. Now let's dive into virtual reality. In one particular cyberpunk story, there's a feature where you can customize your own virtual reality experience. It's like stepping into someone else's shoes and reliving their memories. Now, VR is already pretty amazing in our world. We use it for medical purposes, gaming, and tourism. And here's something even cooler. Imagine being able to feel things in virtual reality. Yeah, it's called haptic technology, and it's being developed to make VR even more immersive. You could use it to control machines, learn in a virtual classroom, or even attend a concert with friends who are miles away. Last but not least, we have artificial intelligence. In a cyberpunk scenario, AI is everywhere, from brain analysis to taxis with intelligent controllers. Now, we might not have all that advanced AI just yet, but we're definitely making progress. You're probably familiar with all those virtual assistants featured on smartphones. Well, imagine them getting even smarter. AI is expected to be integrated into so many aspects of our lives, like fridges that can automatically order groceries when we're running low, self-driving cars, and delivery drones. And hey, AI is already helping companies suggest personalized content based on certain preferences. In the future, it might even help us find the perfect recipe for dinner or recommend the ideal cosmetic product just for us. Then, there's the potential for a brain-computer interface, or BCI for short. In a cyberpunk world, it's like a special connection between our brains and the internet that would allow people to virtually explore using just their minds. In the real world, scientists are already working on developing BCI systems. They can read the signals from our brains and turn them into commands. So instead of using a keyboard or a mouse, we might be able to control objects just by thinking. Right now, these BCI devices are being used in research settings, but someday they could be used to support people. They could help with regaining useful functions and improve rehabilitation. It doesn't stop there, though. BCI could also help professionals like pilots and surgeons. It could make their natural skills even better and help them do their jobs with even more precision. But, there are also some things we need to be careful about when it comes to this cyberpunk technology. In the cyberpunk world, there are serious problems to consider. One of the concerns, for instance, is that if we rely too much on technology, it might start making decisions for us. We might become less skilled at day-to-day tasks because we let the machines do everything for us. That's why we should focus on using our own resources to make our own choices. Another thing we need to watch out for is protecting our information. All sorts of security breaches are already happening all over the world. We need to make sure we have strong measures in place to keep our information safe. Science and technology are moving at an incredible pace these days. It's hard to pinpoint what the future might look like, but you surely have some sort of scenario in mind. Maybe you envision a world where robots and AIs, controlled by a handful of powerful corporations or individuals, dominate the scene with unjust power structures. Or perhaps you picture sprawling cities filled with skyscrapers and flying cars, shrouded in perpetual darkness. And maybe the future seems bleak, where only a privileged few have access to nature, while the rest struggle to make ends meet on a harsh planet. In the cyberpunk world, our planet is either on the brink of a disaster or has already fallen into complete ruin. The stories consistently revolve around dominance and control, whether it's between the rich and the poor, corporations and the market, or humans and the AI robots they create. Cyberpunk is all about systematic and oppressive inequality. It's also about a future where most humans live in a highly mechanized society that disconnects them from the rest of the natural world. In this potential future, all the amazing technologies we've created don't really improve the lives of most people. In fact, they make things worse. It's not all bad, though. Sci-fi can be more than just entertainment. It has a way of inspiring and shaping our real world. Throughout history, designers have drawn inspiration from sci-fi for inventions for things like flip phones, self-driving cars, and even the concept of the metaverse. There are also many interesting alternatives for the future. Ever heard of solarpunk? It's also a genre of speculative fiction, but one that envisions technology and the environment evolving together. The solar part is all about the power of solar energy, while the punk part puts it in the same awesome group as other sci-fi genres like cyberpunk. So what does solarpunk actually look like? Well, imagine visually stunning utopias that are all about the environment and being positive. In solarpunk worlds, they've totally sorted out how to correctly use the planet's resources, or are actively working together to fix it. It's all about coming together and being friends in the fight against a bleak future. When you enter a solarpunk universe, you'll be greeted by groovy green tech, cities that are super walkable, and tons of lush greenery. It's all about living in harmony with nature, while still rocking the latest technology. It's like the complete opposite of cyberpunk, which is all about grimy cities, greedy corporations, and fear of outsiders. Solarpunk is all about putting people first and recognizing the amazing connection between human intelligence and the Earth. One of the major influences on solarpunk is Art Nouveau. This art movement is all about embracing organic and earthly shapes, and it fits perfectly with solarpunk's vibe. Another cool reference for solarpunk is the arts and crafts movement from the late 19th century. It was all about rebelling against unnecessary waste.
Life might not be a walk in the park, but for some people, it is a walk in the garden. Literally. There's a village in Denmark that looks like a carefully curated garden when seen from above. This circular community was built in 1964 on the outskirts of Copenhagen. There are 24 circles made up of a dozen homes each and 284 garden plots. This unusual design might look futuristic, but it was actually inspired by a traditional pattern of Danish villages from centuries ago. The middle of the village, commonly a well, would be the main point for mingling, hanging out, and making that community spirit grow as strong as it can be. Looks like this pizza-shaped planning must cause huge clog-ups when everyone leaves for work in the morning and comes back in the evening. But not really, since the houses are used as weekend getaway spots. It's a big thing in Denmark, as most people living in the city like to have a cabin in the countryside. Only people who permanently reside nearby can buy a house in Garden City. They can visit the cabins from April to October, or during the weekends. The nearby gardens are available for rent at an affordable monthly rate. If you're inspired by futuristic designs, you're definitely going to love Smart Forest City in Mexico. It's still in the project stages and is being designed by the same Italian architect who built the vertical forest in his hometown of Milan. It's 2 huge towers with 700 trees, 11,000 plants, and 5,000 shrubs growing right out of the concrete. The Mexican project will be a botanical garden within a modern city near Cancun, inspired by Mayan heritage and honoring their special relationship and respect for nature. It's going to house 130,000 people in homes covered by plants. It will be a research center, so the residents will be mostly students and scientists who are going to take a record of their unique living experiences. It could transform the cities as we know them into something new. Forest City will be completely self-sufficient. It'll have its own food, energy from solar panels, electric and semi-automatic transportation systems, and water turned from sea salty into drinkable. Talk about the city of the future. The Orbit is the name of another project that is going to transform a rural town in Canada into the city of the future. It will be home to the next generation community. These lucky guys are promised to enjoy the best of both worlds, a rural lifestyle with the cutting-edge technology of the future. The Orbit will be packed with fiber optics, drone ports, self-driving vehicles, and large rooftops with foliage to release plenty of oxygen. The streets will be a mix of circles and squares going from the central hub. Reminds me of that Danish garden city. Don't feel like waiting for cities and villages of the future to be finished? Yeah, I hear ya. Well, may I interest you in an already existing town encrusted with diamonds instead? You won't see them without a microscope, but they're still there in Nördlingen, Germany. When the first residents came here somewhere around the 9th century CE, they were sure they were settling down in a volcanic crater. They didn't know the stone they were using for construction was embedded with millions of tiny diamonds, and the origins of the crater were out of this world. An asteroid slightly larger than half a mile in diameter hit our planet around 14.5 million years ago in what is now Bavaria and left a crater 16 miles wide. The bedrock was under such intense heat and pressure that the bubbles of carbon inside transformed into tiny diamonds at a concentration like nowhere else in the world. The secret was only uncovered in the 1960s, when two geologists from the USA studied the landscape from a distance and noticed it didn't look exactly like a volcanic crater. The Popeye village in Malta might not have any residents, but it's far from being quiet when the visitors arrive. The whole village was once a movie set for the 1980 comic strip screen version of the story of Popeye. Yeah, that sailor who loved spinach a lot. It was the first lead role for Robin Williams, by the way. To build the movie set, they brought tree trunk logs from the Netherlands and some wooden shingles from Canada and built over 20 realistically looking constructions. There's a nautical school, a bakery, a post office, the mayor's office, and Popeye Comic Museum. The movie became a huge hit, and the locals decided not to part with it. Instead of disassembling it, they turned the set into a theme park. You can have some family fun here, and the color of the water in the bay is out of this world. If you feel like saving some money for your new home, you might consider investing in real estate in the Spanish town of Centennial de las Bodegas. You won't need to pay for building some of the walls and the ceilings. 3,000 locals live under and directly into the sides of Cadiz Mountains. The place has a history of at least 2,000 years. The cliffs have protected many generations living here from unwanted guests. Plus, the rocks keep the houses cool in the summer and warm in the winter. That's right, you can also save on air conditioning. The sense of community is strong as ever in our next destination. Santa Cruz del Isolte in Colombia is one of the world's most crowded islands, with around 900 to 1,200 residents living in the territory about the size of 2 soccer fields. Fishermen built this island on a coral platform over a century ago. They chose it because of its beautiful location and the absence of mosquitoes. I can completely relate to that. The families of the original settlers were growing, and most of them never left the island. All the residents are natives, and they all have one of 6 different last names. When the family needs extra space, they just add an extra floor to one of around 100 homes in town. Now it has a school, shops, a church, and 1 restaurant. There is no traffic, since the streets aren't wide enough for cars or trucks, and the distances are perfectly walkable. And there's no need to lock the doors when you leave. Everyone knows each other, so the crime rate equals 0. Ever wondered what it's like to live inside a beehive? Well, you can experience something close, at least in terms of shape, if you stay in the Italian town of Alberobello. These houses, called trulli, have their history. In the 17th century, the King of Naples sent tax collectors to the area. The local lord had a smart idea to build a settlement of houses that could be easily assembled and disassembled to avoid paying the settlement tax. Even when the town became free from their overseer, they kept the original style of their houses with dry stone walls and conical roofs. Game of Thrones fans, this one's for you. You can find the real-life village that served as the backdrop for the Yellow City in your favorite saga in Morocco. And it's much more than just a movie set. The village is a UNESCO heritage site and a typical example of a pre-Saharan habitat. Earthen buildings are safely protected by high walls. Some of the houses look pretty modest. Others are more like urban castles. The village used to be one of the key stops on the ancient Sahara trade route. Traders would take a nice break from traveling here on their way to Timbuktu, or the Western Sahara. It looks like it's thousands of years old, but in reality, the oldest constructions here were built no earlier than the 17th century. But even that is pretty impressive. The builders of the earthen village have adapted it perfectly to climatic conditions. The larger houses are regularly maintained, and the materials used are still the same: earth and wood.
Alright, let's imagine that humans have evolved to survive on very little oxygen. That means the Earth is now a no-go zone for us. And let's say that now we can live only on planets with little to no oxygen. It's time to build new homes on Mercury and Jupiter. So let's explore what life would be like if that happened. As you set foot on Mercury, you'll immediately notice how crazily bright it is. Mercury, being the closest planet to the Sun, is a never-ending summer vacation. Right now, it's scorching hot at a sizzling 800 degrees Fahrenheit. But since we don't need any water or oxygen, our bodies have adapted to the blazing heat and dry conditions of Mercury. Instead of overheating, our skin possesses a special protective layer that helps us handle these conditions. So, we're able to live there without any discomfort. How cool is that? On Mercury, the air is very thin. As a result, the sky there appears mostly dark and empty. The surface, however, is pretty colorful. It can appear orange and golden due to the planet's rocky terrain and the intense sunlight. All this creates some captivating views. Our activities would be super exciting. The gravity on Mercury is very weak, almost 3 times weaker than Earth's. So, imagine gliding through the air with incredible wingsuits, effortlessly soaring above the molten landscapes. So many possible cool tricks to show off. The buildings in this world are both imaginative and practical. They're made of special materials that can handle the heat and shine with a metallic gold color, reflecting the scorching sunlight. As you can see, our life in this small, hot world can still be pretty exciting. But let's move on to Venus. Now we've got ourselves quite a workload. This is the wildest and wackiest planet in the neighborhood. Temperatures there sizzle at a mind-boggling 900 degrees Fahrenheit. But guess what? Our bodies are cool with it. We can handle extreme temperatures. The winds there are crazy fast, reaching speeds of 224 miles per hour. Amongst them, we spot mysterious dark streaks that refuse to budge. Even scientists are puzzled by these streaks, which soak up ultraviolet radiation. It's like Venus has some secret party tricks up its sleeve. And speaking of parties, the planet is packed with active volcanoes, and they're always putting on quite a show. Molten lava flows and fiery eruptions are our daily dose of entertainment. Venus is similar in size to Earth, so the landscape feels familiar, but with a twist. It has a crazy amount of pressure that would make even the toughest creatures on Earth squirm. But not us. Our bodies are built to handle it, and we confidently strut around Venus like it's no big deal. Our cities shine like beacons, built with materials that can handle the intense heat and pressure. The metallic structures reflect the fiery glow of the Venusian sun. Inside, we've got super advanced cooling systems that keep us comfy despite the scorching temperatures. We surf on streams of molten lava, safely of course, and explore the volcanic landscapes. Pretty exciting, isn't it? But still, how about moving to a more friendly environment? Like Mars. Moving to Mars is one of our biggest goals. Its surface is a colorful canvas with hues of brown, gold, and tan. It's covered in rusting iron, regolith, which is like Martian soil, and dust. We would also be surrounded by volcanoes, impact craters, crustal movement, and mighty dust storms. As we gaze into the sky, we're greeted by Phobos and Deimos, Mars's moons. The sky itself is hazy and painted in shades of red, and becomes blue during the sunset, opposite to what we have on Earth. The temperatures on Mars can be quite extreme. Sometimes it's as mild as a comfortable 70 degrees Fahrenheit, while at other times it plunges to bone-chilling lows of around negative 225 degrees Fahrenheit. But once again, let's assume that our bodies have adapted to handle these swings. We've also developed ways to safeguard ourselves from meteorites and asteroids. These guys will be our frequent guests. The thin atmosphere of Mars doesn't provide much protection from them. Out of all the planets, Mars would be the easiest one for us to adapt to. Our next candidates, though, are not that hospitable. Living on Jupiter, the gas giant is a whole new level of adventure. Since there's no solid ground to walk on, we've come up with some super cool ways to call this place home. Picture floating cities like gigantic bubbles, suspended in swirling gases and liquids. They're specially designed to withstand extreme pressures and temperatures. To get around, we have jetpacks and hovercrafts. Imagine floating amidst Jupiter's majestic atmosphere, surrounded by cold, windy clouds of ammonia and water. These vibrant stripes and swirls paint the planet with a colorful palette. We zip through the colorful clouds, enjoying a mesmerizing kaleidoscope. Our homes and cities are filled with vibrant colors and shimmering lights. We've even created artificial gravity zones, where we can experience a semblance of gravity and walk with a bounce in our step. But be careful. Jupiter's powerful storms can be intense. Luckily, we have advanced weather prediction technology that keeps us safe. We watch the mesmerizing light shows of lightning dancing across the sky, marveling at the raw power of nature. All this sounds pretty fun, doesn't it? Well, what about the next gas giant, Saturn? Once again, we can live in the skies of Saturn, right among its beautiful rings. Our cities are like big, colorful balloons that sparkle and shine with bright lights. Inside, we have large domes where we can freely enjoy everything this incredible planet has to offer. Instead of walking, we use special devices that make us glide through the air, just like on Jupiter. In this extraordinary place, we had to discover new ways to generate power. We use the energy from Saturn's powerful storms. These sources of energy help us fuel our floating cities, giving us the electricity and resources we need to thrive. Saturn has many moons, and each one has its own special features. We've set up outposts on some of these moons, where we can go on exciting adventures and explore their mysterious landscapes. But if living on a gas giant wasn't challenging enough, we also have ice giants in our system. Welcome to the fascinating world of Uranus. Despite the super chilly temperature of -353 degrees Fahrenheit, we've come up with clever ways to make this place livable. To create warmth, we can learn from Earth's greenhouse effect. Like a cozy blanket, we can introduce special gases into Uranus's atmosphere that trap heat. Another idea is to build gigantic mirrors to capture and reflect the sun's heat. But let's be honest, it would be quite a challenge to position all those massive mirrors just right. Our homes are designed to withstand extreme conditions. We use dense fluids like methane, ammonia, and water to build structures that keep us warm and cozy. Our habitats provide shelter from the freezing temperatures outside. We may even discover new forms of life that have adapted to the unique conditions of this icy giant. Now that would be chilling for sure. And finally, we have Neptune. It is the cool and distant cousin of the solar system. Neptune's atmosphere is mostly composed of hydrogen, helium, and methane. There's also no water, only lots and lots of ice. But that's fine with us, right? So it's time to construct habitats. Let's envision another sky city. After all, who doesn't love the idea of floating cities amidst the clouds? Imagine gazing out from your sky city, observing the mesmerizing hues and swirling storms of this ice giant. The vibrant colors of the atmosphere would paint a breathtaking backdrop for our daily adventures. We'd explore the mysteries of Neptune's moons, delving into their icy landscapes and uncovering the secrets they hold. Hey, a world where humans don't need oxygen or water to survive doesn't sound that bad. We'd soar through the skies and roam vast landscapes. The only limits we would have would be the limits of our own imagination. So stay tuned for more captivating what-if scenarios.
New Zealand is a hidden gem in terms of size and climate. It's like the Clark Kent of countries, bigger than you think, and with some serious superpowers. Let's take a closer look at the map. You see those two islands? They may have simple names, but they're actually giants in disguise. The North Island and South Island are the 14th and 12th largest islands in the world. Who would have thought New Zealand was hiding such big secrets? And speaking of size, New Zealand is even bigger than the UK. That's right, it takes the 75th place on the chart of countries by area. Bonus, the climate is still perfect for any human out there. No dry season, warm summers, and mild winters. It's like the country was designed by Goldilocks herself. With all those perks, you'd think millions of people would be flocking to New Zealand. Like the UK is cool, and there's a lot of people, about 68 million people. And in New Zealand, which is also cool, just slightly above 5 million. Wait, hold on a sec. Let me double check. Seems like I've lost a zero somewhere. Nope, I was right. There are 5.2 million people living in New Zealand. Hold up a minute. How on earth is this even possible? New Zealanders got it all. The perfect setting, the ideal weather, and they can even crash in a hobbit hole if that's their thing. And the craziest part is they can use hobbit money to actually pay. I kid you not. New Zealand is the only country in the world that can legally use hobbit coins as currency. These coins feature characters like Bilbo Baggins and Gandalf and are totally legit. Although, let's be real, their face value won't get you very far. The most expensive one is made of pure gold and costs a whopping 3,695 New Zealand dollars, which is slightly more than 2,000 in US dollars. But it only has a face value of 10 New Zealand dollars, which is just $6. So dudes who are into Tolkien with some extra cash to burn, New Zealand might be your next vacation spot. New Zealand sounds fun, huh? But wait, where are all the people at? It's like a ghost town up in here. Let's take a closer look at why this place is so sparsely populated. According to some sources, a whopping 80% of the country is empty. That's right, you could probably shout your deepest secrets into the void and no one would hear you. Now let's break it down with some fancy schmancy pie charts. As it turns out, only 23% of the population lives in the South Island, while a whopping 77% reside in the North Island. And get this, even though the North Island is smaller, it's where all the cool kids are hanging out. Speaking of cool kids, about 37% of New Zealanders live in Auckland. Yeah, you heard that right. Not even the capital city can compete with Auckland's popularity. Wellington is the capital, and it only has about 200,000 people living there. I mean, come on, even Alaska has more people than that. So, the South Island of the country is basically in the middle of nowhere. It's like a ghost town, but with mountains and more sheep than you can count. Seriously, the sheep outnumber the people by a long shot. The country's main industry is agriculture, especially sheep farming. Fun fact, for every Kiwi, there are at least 10 sheep. Huh? Seems like we've got the first answer. New Zealand is like the Alaska of the world. Nah, it's not that cold, but it's definitely isolated. New Zealand is located in the South Pacific and is far away from other countries. Did you know that New Zealand is so remote that it's considered the world's most isolated landmass? Yep, it's situated in the southern oceans, far away from any other major landmass. No wonder it took so long for people to settle there. But even though it's far away, New Zealand's closest neighbor is Australia, which is still over 1,000 miles away. And if you're thinking of flying there, be prepared for a long and expensive journey. Since New Zealand is a small country with only a few airports and airlines, there's not much competition when it comes to flights. This means that airlines can charge a pretty penny for those tickets. But don't worry, there's a silver lining. The lack of competition means that airlines have to adjust their flight availability and capacity to meet customer demand. So while the airfare rates may be high, at least you'll have plenty of options for when to travel. Let's go back to New Zealand's sparseness. A whopping 30% of the country is actually a national reserve. That's like having a third of your backyard declared as a protected area. No wonder New Zealand is known for its stunning green hills and forests that are filled with all sorts of plants and wildlife. From Mount Cook to Milford Sound, Tongariro and Coromandel, this country is truly a natural paradise. And you know what's even cooler? The people of New Zealand are super eco-conscious, which is probably why they've made such an effort to protect their natural wonders. It's like they're saying, hey, we want to enjoy this beautiful land for generations to come, so let's take care of it. That's a cool philosophy. Don't expect too much action here. There's not a whole lot going on. Tourism is a big deal, but most visitors are just passing through or on a working holiday. Can you blame them though? The scenery is straight up breathtaking. Alright, what about its population? Still no answer. Right, New Zealand's land area is smaller than Colorado, and there are only around 5 million people living there. And the climate's pretty chill. So what's the problem? Well, there are pitfalls. This place can get pretty wild with earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, and storms. But if you're up for a challenge, living in New Zealand might be just the thing for you. Just make sure you pack your earthquake kit and raincoat. Even though it's not freezing cold like in Alaska, there's still a problem with getting warm during winter months. The houses in New Zealand are about as insulated as a cardboard box, and energy prices are through the roof. So, when winter rolls around, it's basically like living in an igloo. No wonder people don't want to stick around. Also, getting to these igloos can be a real challenge. Just take a look at Dunedin, the second largest city in the South Island of New Zealand. It's home to the steepest road in the world. According to the Guinness Book of Records, Baldwin Street has a slope of 19 degrees, making it a real thigh burner for those who dare to climb it. There's a fun annual event held in this street. During the Cadbury Jaffa race, thousands of chocolate balls are rolled down Baldwin Street for charity. As for living at the top of this street, well, let's just say you'll have steel muscles and a great view. But if you're feeling lazy, maybe invest in a ski lift. Just kidding, there's no ski lift. But wouldn't that be cool? Did you know that the town with the longest name in the world is in New Zealand? It's called... Yeah, you saw that. Please don't make me pronounce it. And no one smashed a keyboard to come up with that. Hey, and what if there are so few people in New Zealand just because it's hard to pronounce some toponyms? The town is located on the east coast of New Zealand, and its Maori translation is quite interesting. It means the place where Tamatea, the man with the big knees who slid, climbed, and swallowed mountains, known as the Land Eater, played his flute to his loved ones. Now that's a mouthful. Luckily for locals, they simply refer to it as Tamata Hill. However, if you're planning on visiting, keep in mind that it's on private land and permission is required before you can walk to it.
You are finally visiting the Eiffel Tower. It's a sunny day and the view is clear. Let's just say you couldn't have chosen a better day to go. Except that when you arrive, your guide has a little surprise in store for you. He says, "Oh no, we're not going up the tower. We're going under it." Your confused look makes the guide add, "Sorry, but you booked the alternative tour. So you're visiting the Eiffel Tower's bunker." Few people know this, but there is a network of underground tunnels beneath the famous Tour Eiffel. Lucky for you, we'll get a tour of them today. Heading down the stairs in the south pillar of the tower, you see a closed green door. The whole thing looks so surreal. First, because you've literally just found out about it. And second, well, because it looks like you're facing platform 9 3/4, or even Narnia's magic wardrobe. What's behind that green door? You think to yourself. You step inside and, uh-oh, this doesn't look like a 20th century bunker. Actually, the main hallway looks like the inside of a hospital, so white and sterile. Today, much of the old bunker is used as food storage. I know, it's not that exciting, but in one of its rooms, time does seem to have stopped. Look, the elevator's machine house. Now, these aren't your typical elevators. These were some of Eiffel's prized innovations when he built the tower. Gustav Eiffel used the Eiffel Tower as a startup lab for personal innovations. And the hydraulic elevators you're looking at now were one of those. Keep in mind that the tower was built in 1889, so these types of things weren't too common. These sturdy iron boxes had to lift visitors 380 feet above ground, and that's no joke. The funny thing, though, is that Eiffel's hydraulic elevators are more trustworthy than the modern elevators used at the Tour Eiffel today. Apparently, the 100-year-old elevators break down much less. I guess a good job is in order for Mr. Eiffel. You may or may not know this, but Eiffel's Iron Lady was only meant to stand for 20 years. It was built for the World's Fair, and the construction process was quite impressive. I mean, they managed to build this iron giant in 2 years. But Eiffel didn't want his construction to be torn down, so he kept inventing ways of prolonging its life. That's why the Eiffel Tower became home to so many different projects. The bunker is one of them, of course. But the construction also became home to a wireless telegraph station at the top of the tower. You can see some of its memorabilia down here in the bunker. Fun fact, the French liked the idea of using the tower for broadcasting, so they continue using it to this day. The bunker and the tunnels surrounding it were kept a state secret for nearly 70 years, and there are still many mysteries revolving around them. Like the speculation that perhaps one of these tunnels leads directly to the French École Militaire, all the way on the other side of the Champ de Mars. But these aren't the only underground tunnels that exist in Paris. Have you ever heard of the catacombs? Scary name, huh? And they are a bit scary indeed. It just depends on the part of the catacombs you choose to visit. There are over 200 miles of these tunnels under Paris. We're basically talking about a city under a city. The construction of the catacombs started in 1774, and now they serve as an ossuary. Yep, I told you it was scary. But since you're already in Paris, make sure to check out this amazing attraction. The most famous catacomb for tourists is the one beneath the d'Enfer Rochereau Square in the 14th district. Going down there is an experience in itself. It's dark, and the ventilation isn't great. The main attraction is strolling alongside miles and miles of walls filled with bones. This special feature doesn't bother some people, but it sure bothers me though. Ugh. In the 19th century, the catacombs started being used as a cultural hotspot for plays and concerts. But this usage of the underground tunnels didn't stay limited to earlier centuries. People are using it today for several purposes, from secret parties to underground movie theaters. Can you imagine a fully equipped restaurant and popcorn bar ready to receive people eager to watch their favorite movies underground? Paris might have surprised you with all of its hidden underground secrets, but it's time to head back home to New York City. Inspired by your latest trip, you decide to do some research on the New York Underground. And guess what? All your life, you've been missing out on exploring half of your city, the half that's hidden under your feet. This tour starts above ground. You're wandering around the posh Lexington and Park Avenues. If you look up toward the skyline, you'll see the famous Waldorf Astoria five-star hotel, where many celebrities have stayed, including John Lennon, Yoko Ono, and presidents such as FDR. That's why the hotel used a secret infrastructure to sneak people inside and out. Under the building, a tunnel known as Track 61 connects the Waldorf Astoria to Grand Central Station. The track was deactivated in the late 70s, but some people say that Andy Warhol threw a party there in the 60s. I bet that was something else. For the next part of our visit, we'll have to take the subway uptown. We'll get off at 125th Street and find ourselves on the scenic waterfront of Riverside Park. Here, you'll find abandoned tracks of an old metro line. The tracks will lead us into an underground graffiti gallery, aka the Freedom Tunnel. The tunnel is named after a graffiti artist from the 80s who was commonly known as Freedom. Exploring the area, we'll see over 40 pieces of graffiti that he painted over 15 years, including spray paints of James Dean, the Mona Lisa, and even a self-portrait of Freedom himself. Moving on, let's wander around the northern part of NYC Island for a bit. Walking in Van Cortlandt Park will feel like hiking upstate, but believe me, you're still in the city. Along the path, you'll encounter some big ventilation towers made of stone. These towers used to be part of New York's infrastructure. They make up the remains of what was once the Croton Aqueduct. In the 1800s, the city's water supply flowed through a 41-mile underground tunnel all the way from the Croton River upstate to Bryant Park in Midtown Manhattan. Oh yes, I should tell you, Bryant Park wasn't always a park. Instead, it housed a colossal stone structure that looked pretty much like an Egyptian building. This 4-acre structure served as the city's water reservoir. It even had a pathway on top, so that people could enjoy a nice afternoon stroll looking at the reservoir's crystalline water. Now, all this exploring might have made you hungry, but don't worry. Our next stop has a delicious treat. We'll have to leave Manhattan and make our way to Brooklyn. In case you didn't know, New York City is made up of 5 boroughs: Manhattan, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, and Brooklyn. And here it is, Crown Heights. That's our stop. Would you believe me if I told you that beneath these streets lie caves full of aging cheese? How very Parisian of them. To get down there, you'll have to make your way through a century-old building that now works as an office space. Maybe wave hi to the hardworking people. And disappear into one of the stairways that will take you 30 feet below the ground. You won't need a flashlight for this one. The caves are bright and renovated and can hold up to 28,000 pounds of cheese. But hey, it might stink. That's the main reason cheesemakers decided to use underground tunnels to age cheese in the first place. I have to say, I just love exploring the underground of famous cities. We'll have to continue this some other time, though. See ya!
How do you imagine ancient megaliths? Perhaps Stonehenge in England or the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt come to mind. They've become household names. Millions of people visit these sites every year. But thousands of miles away from such tourist hotspots, there is a mystery. Ruins of a city that is several hundred years old. And it doesn't sit in a desert or on a grassy plain. Its former inhabitants constructed it on a coral reef in the middle of the Pacific. The tiny island nation of Micronesia lies between Hawaii and the Philippines. The country is composed of 600 islands and islets. Because of its remote location, very few people visit Micronesia. The little tourists they have mostly come to go scuba diving in its azure waters. They often miss the opportunity to visit the only ancient city that stands on a coral reef, Nan Madol. Its home island is slightly smaller in size than New York City. Its ruins are made of heavy stone columns. There are walls and platforms, but one thing is missing: art. There are no ancient carvings to help archaeologists determine how ancient islanders constructed the site. Still, an international team of researchers was able to date Nan Madol. They presume that the history of the city goes back to the very end of the 12th century. For reference, these were the High Middle Ages in Europe, right around the time Richard I became the first king of England. In the Caroline Archipelago, where the island sits, this was the time when a powerful dynasty reigned over the island nation. Its chiefs ruled for 1,000 years and unified the islanders. This enabled them to construct something as imposing as Nan Madol. One of the local legends said that the final resting place of the first of these chiefs was somewhere among the ruins. National Geographic launched an expedition to investigate this oral history, and sure enough, they discovered a tomb. It was the size of a football pitch. It featured a labyrinth of walls and passages, just like the ones found in the Egyptian pyramids. The list of similarities doesn't end there. The stone structure in Micronesia didn't seem to have a practical purpose, and a lot of effort went into building it. Its construction presents an engineering mystery for archaeologists. The same can be said for the pyramids in Egypt. The recently discovered tomb offers a clue. It contained an underground crypt which was capped off with a basalt stone. This is a volcanic rock that forms after lava cools down. It's dark in color and rich in iron and magnesium. The whole island is made of a similar volcanic material. It used to be part of an ancient volcano that eroded over time. Basalt boulders can be found all over the archipelago. They're in the shape of long hexagonal columns. The shape is not unusual and can be found all over the planet. Perhaps the most impressive sight of basalt columns is Giant's Causeway in Ireland. These rocks formed from 1 to 8 million years ago. The locals probably sourced them from several quarries on the island. This is where the mystery begins. They each weigh several tons, so it's unclear how the natives transported them to the site. They had to navigate the entire width of the island and a lagoon covered with mangroves. These are dense shrubs and trees that grow near the coastline. And the size of the site is impressive. It spans close to 190 acres of a shallow coral reef. That's 4 times the surface size of Grand Central Station. As you might know, the Great Barrier Reef off the northeastern coast of Australia is the largest coral reef system on the planet. but it's a completely natural formation. The coral reef that supports Nan Madol isn't. It's man-made. Stone structures there rest on around 100 artificial coral reefs. The tribes that used to live in the area constructed each and every one of them. They stand at a height of about 3 feet above the waterline. Archaeologists were amazed by the clever building technique. Ancient builders would paddle out at low tide and retrieve coral from the surrounding waters. The conditions for it to grow fast here were perfect. Then, they placed parts of the coral inside underwater frames of stone. Once the first level was filled in, they added another row of stones and repeated the process. This allowed the foundation to rise above the water level. These islets were crisscrossed with tidal canals. The site had 12 walls to protect it against the sea. Harbors today still have similar breakwaters. The general layout of Nan Madol earned it the nickname the Venice of the Pacific. The coral base was strong enough to support the weight of all those basalt columns. Some estimates reveal that all the stones used in the construction weighed 250 million tons. This makes sense when we look at the largest monoliths on the site. These are massive stones that can be both artificial and naturally occurring. An individual cornerstone from the city walls weighs close to 55 tons, and there are several of them stacked on top of each other. The wall they form is higher than a telephone pole. In 1995, the Discovery Channel did an experiment for a special on Nan Madol. They constructed bamboo rafts to test how the ancient builders moved stones around. They were a fraction of the width of the real monoliths. The rafts sank almost immediately. The site's been sitting uninhabited for centuries now. The island's first settlers came by sea around the 1st century. Historians believe they arrived from the nearby Solomon or Vanuatu Islands. The city became a regional administration center at the end of the 11th century. Its heyday is associated with the powerful ruling dynasty. It lasted for nearly 5 centuries. European traders knew about the island for a long time. In the mid-19th century, the Spanish established schools there. In 1873, a Polish anthropologist was the first to systematically explore the ruins of the city. He found heaps of coral, simple bracelets, necklaces, and stone axes. There were also round discs with a hole in the middle that probably served as currency. In modern times, the island became part of Micronesia. Today, the local tribal chief is the supervisor of the ruins. His title dates back to the times of Nan Madol's builders. But the locals cannot explain how exactly their ancestors erected the stone structures. The country's former top archaeologist was once quoted saying, "We don't know how they brought the columns here, and we don't know how they lifted them up to build the walls." Researchers from around the world were determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, quite literally. In 2019, an American team of scientists performed the first ever LiDAR scan of the site. This type of radar uses laser wave pulses to scan under the surface of the Earth. This allows the technicians to create a 3D image of the ground below. The scan revealed a complex irrigation system on the tiny island. This probably explains how ancient Micronesians were able to supply the nearby settlements with drinking water. When it comes to food, it was probably boated in. According to the local population, historians estimate that at the time of the city's construction, 20 to 30,000 people lived on the island. In 2016, UNESCO inscribed Nan Madol as a World Heritage Site. The future of the city is uncertain because of the state the waterways are in. They're overgrown with mangroves. The vegetation is undermining the existing structures, and more can be done to promote the place as a tourist attraction. The site gets about 1,000 visitors annually. Compare that to 50,000 people who visit Easter Island each year. Both destinations are pretty far away from the nearest mainland. The distance from Nan Madol to California is more than twice the length of the Mississippi River. Imagine you're driving through the Sahara Desert and in the rearview mirror, you see a giant wall of dust and sand that touches the sky, and it's coming your way. You speed up your little Jeep trying to outrun it, but it's too close. Some of these dust storms can be as high as 10,000 feet and shut out the light if it's broad daylight. Crazy enough, these sky-touching dust walls can last anywhere from 30 minutes. Haboob, is an Arabic word that means to blow. They're known to cover entire cities when they're at their peak, and they're most common in May and September. If it's during the daytime, then you're safe, since haboobs mostly appear in the afternoon and the evening. However, just because you're not in the Sahara region or the northern parts of Sudan doesn't mean you're safe. These giant storms are also present in Central Australia, some parts of the United States, and areas near Mexico. They happen when thunderstorm winds blow out dust or sand and then create a giant wall. It's a column of sinking air inside a thunderstorm that strikes the ground and spreads out in all directions, snatching all of the dust particles along the way. You cannot outrun them unless you have cheetah legs and can sprint up to 60 miles an hour. And even if you do have cheetah legs, you still won't be able to outrun them. They block out all visibility so that no one can do anything beyond the wall. As tall as they are also many miles long, sometimes stretching as far as 100 miles, and appear out of nowhere. And once you're caught in one of these, then good luck. Besides blocking out all visibility, it's also very difficult to breathe in those. There are some safety tips and tricks in case you're caught in one of these dust traps. Firstly, you spot it coming your way, and if you're in a car, then don't try to outdrive it. The wind speeds are far higher than your car's. And even if you could outdrive it, the risk of driving insanely fast is another danger to worry about. It's highly advisable to pull over on the side but as far away from the main road as possible and park your car. Close all the windows and make sure you don't have any lights on, especially the brake lights. It might sound logical to keep them on to alert any oncoming driver behind you, but there have been some reports where drivers thought that the car lights were guides and they crashed into the parked cars. In some cases, there is no place to pull over, so maintain your speed and switch on the high beams. Turn on the blinkers so that people at the back can see you, and honk your horn every now and then so that if people can't see you, then they can hear you. Keep driving until the haboob passes through you. Oh, and don't leave any windows open as well. If you're without a vehicle and the haboob is coming your way, then try to find shelter in the nearest location and make sure to cover yourself with something. Most importantly, cover your face and close your eyes. These storms are especially dangerous for animals since they can affect their breathing. Many scientists point out that every haboob is a sandstorm, but not every sandstorm is a haboob. What makes a haboob stand out is that they're accompanied by a thunderstorm. Another risk of haboobs is the risk of wildfires. While these unique storms are something we should be worried about, there is something scarier than that. What's scarier than a raging tornado? A raging tornado covered in fire. Yes, it exists. Fire whirls are not that common to see, but they have happened in the past, especially during forest fires. For a fire whirl to happen, air needs to be dry. Scientists also call a fire tornado a pyrogenetic tornado. And like a regular tornado, there has to be open space to happen. That's why many of the tornadoes we see on the news happen between Texas and Arkansas, where there aren't many rocky lands and mountains. But of course, they can be all over the world as well. It's not often to see tornadoes in bustling downtown and condensed cities. They need a lot of open space, but it still may happen. A tornado forms in a supercell. That's when you have two different air temperatures conflicting. The vortex that we see in tornadoes forms when warm air and moisture in the upper region of the tornado cause an updraft. At the same time, cold and dry air is being pushed downwards from the sky, causing a downdraft. This happens as it begins to get bigger and bigger, causing it to tilt at an angle and then form a tornado. This updraft of warm air at the top will cause the vortex to grow even bigger with water vapor. This is the spiral funnel cloud we see in tornadoes. With pressure from the updraft and downdraft tugging on each other, a tornado is formed. You'll be lucky to outrun a tornado in a storm. Normally, it can run as fast as 30 miles per hour, but can even reach as fast as 70 miles per hour. Scientists usually predict tornadoes by monitoring the amount of moisture in the air. Every second counts when giving a warning. In some cases, you can see more than one tornado in the same storm. That's if you're in the region with extensive open land to fit them. Seriously, duck for cover if you're in one. But this doesn't really apply to a fire tornado. These happen out of nowhere. These spinning winds of flame can have a speed of 140 miles per hour and can be between 15 to 150 feet tall, and range from 1 foot to more than 500 feet wide. These monsters occur when so much smoke is accumulated and creates a sort of pyrocumulonimbus over the fire vortex. This basically means all the fire smoke mimics a thunderstorm, recreating the conditions it would need for a tornado to be formed in an actual thunderstorm. Here's a fun fact. Mini fire tornadoes can even occur in a bonfire, and they're called fire whirls. The principle of updraft and downdraft applies here as well, just on a small scale. So next time you're camping or setting up the fireplace, pay attention to the details. You might just find one spinning around, but don't worry, they don't grow or become dangerous. The best way to protect yourself is, you can't. If you're caught in one, then seriously, good luck. The best way is to hide away from it. What you can do is put a piece of wet cloth by your face to filter out some of the nasty stuff in the air to help your breathing. If you ever see a microburst storm, don't panic. It's a sudden surge of wind and rain, blowing and clouding anyone's vision that comes out of nowhere. It's a small version of a downburst, which is a column of sinking air with intensely high-speed winds associated with thunderstorms. Just like a regular tornado, these microbursts can severely damage landscapes and buildings. They're also very dangerous to airplanes flying above. Microbursts are no bigger than 2.5 miles in scale, but they can produce dangerous winds of up to 150 miles per hour, similar to that of a tornado. And just like haboobs, they can be extremely dry, but unlike haboobs, they can be wet or a combination of the two. The good thing about these is that there can be warnings before it takes place. When it does happen, drop everything and go as far away as possible. It's a good thing that you'll have around 6 to 12 hours to prepare yourself before it develops. The experts need to monitor the dry air and strong winds. Otherwise, getting caught in one of these is very, very dangerous. There was once this densely packed city that had just a single mail carrier. I wouldn't trade my job for this, that's for sure. Even though his delivery route was tiny, barely even 1/100th of a square mile, it surely was crammed with people. Try to picture it for a moment. Around 350 buildings, nearly all towering between 10 and 14 floors, squeezed into that tiny space. These buildings were home to a whopping 8,000 businesses, over 10,000 families, and a total of over 33,000 people. It was a real urban jungle. Tall, skinny towers were squeezed so close together, it felt like you were stepping into a single, gigantic, living, breathing structure, rather than a city. The buildings were all over the place too. The look or feel wasn't consistent, just a mix and mash of different materials. Iron balconies rubbed shoulders with brick extensions and concrete walls. Wiring and cables ran all over the place, up and down buildings, linking rooftop antennas or winding around. It looked like a zillion dark threads tying the whole place together. Stepping into this city was a unique experience. There were hundreds of narrow alleys, some skirting beneath buildings. Others were more like tunnels. They were formed by the heaps of trash dropped onto the netting that connected those constructions. Oh, and the pipes. There were pipes everywhere. Most of them dripped with leakage and rusting away too, so the city's mail carrier, smart as he was, always wore a hat to dodge the incessant drips. The building's inhabitants had their own solution. They used umbrellas, even on sunny days. Now you'd think in this place there'd be elevators to help, right? Well, it turns out there were just 2 for the whole city. Now, this city wasn't just a cluster of buildings, it was teeming with life and business. Factories were producing all sorts of stuff. Some corridors were dusted with flour used in noodle making. Chemical smells weren't lacking either, coming from metal and plastic manufacturers. Doctors and dentists were proudly performing their services too. Areas like Big Well Street, Bright Street and Dragon Street Road were buzzing with shops and food stalls, some offering exotic specialties. Deeper into the city, you'd hear the constant click of mahjong tiles. This was a lawless land, a self-regulating, self-determining society. A city within a city, a little chunk of territory hotly contested yet overlooked. The name? Kowloon Walled City, but the locals called it the City of Darkness. These days, you'll find remnants of this weird place in Hong Kong, a city equally filled with history and complexities. But how did the City of Darkness come to be? I'll spare you the historical back and forth, but in short, authorities started building a fort right at the tip of the Kowloon Peninsula after a series of conflicts. This was in the 1840s. The stronghold was big, surrounded by a 700-foot-long, 400-foot-wide wall. It was also home to official agencies and had enough space to host over 100 people. But just about 2 decades later, conflicts broke out again in the area, and the whole Kowloon Peninsula was seized by foreigners, with the exception of the walled city. For the next 30 years, this walled city fought hard not to be taken over. Decades later, the living conditions in Kowloon were pretty bad, prompting the Hong Kong authorities to plan a cleanup. But the city's residents weren't too keen on leaving. They lashed out, and news spread far and wide. Life in Kowloon continued, despite it being somewhat of an unregulated city. 5 notorious gangs took advantage of the city's extra-legal status and flourished. They completely changed this city, which was ironically once built to safeguard the local area. But Kowloon wasn't just defined by its lawless element. Entrepreneurs found an opportunity amidst the chaos. Factories popped up, producing goods that were distributed across Hong Kong and even globally. Even with all the turmoil, the walled city evolved and a system of self-government formed. The living conditions were cramped, but the people of Kowloon demonstrated resilience. With no restrictions on how they should be constructed, high-rise buildings sprouted up. They basically leaned on each other for support, creating a sort of city of darkness. It was not until 1987 that the Hong Kong government finally decided to clear out the area, and this time, there was no interference. By July 1992, all the residents had been evicted, and Kowloon Walled City was enclosed with a tall wire fence, tracing the old granite wall of the original city. Later on, in March 1993, the city was already being taken down. This first whack of the wrecking ball was mostly for show though, because the real demolition job on Kowloon was scheduled to kick off a bit later. Almost a year went by, and then the city was nothing but a heap of dust and rubble. However, in the process of pulling it down, bits of the original city poked through the debris. The workers uncovered 2 granite plaques, one that said Southgate, and the other Kowloon Walled City. Once the wrecked tower blocks were removed, more remnants of the past emerged, including some pieces of the original wall foundation and 3 iron cannons, a hint of the city's past defenses. In the middle of it all, a single structure still stood tall. This building had managed to survive Kowloon's tumultuous history. Over the next year, the ruins started to change quickly into a beautiful park. The pathways in this new garden were given the names of the old city streets and buildings that had once stood in the same place. The Kowloon Walled City was officially opened in 1995. It took over 6 decades, but finally, Kowloon was turned into a social spot. It became a space filled with stunning bamboo pavilions, beautiful water features, and lush greenery. But let's rewind for a moment. This is more than just a tale of a rundown area being turned into a park. The neighborhood was born from an oddity in history, gained a dodgy rep, and then, like many of its kind, ended up causing embarrassment until the authorities decided to bring it down. Is there more to this story? Plenty of people would say no, but even though locals and tourists now enjoy the park, some might miss the tight, dark alleyways. Some architectural fans can't help but come back to Kowloon. On this tiny rectangle of land, a single community created something that had previously only existed in the minds of radical architects: the organic megastructure. The whole idea was quite a leap in the late 60s from the conventional cityscape. Instead of buildings arranged around public areas like streets and squares, the vision was of a single, continuous city. It would be made of modules that could be added indefinitely, making a space that was a living, evolving organism meeting all its citizens' needs. It would also have the ability to attach more and more pieces to meet changing wants and needs. This concept got a lot of architects thinking. Some even proposed such a location for 1 million people. They imagined one long city on gigantic pillars going straight across North America from the Atlantic to the Pacific. You guessed it, Kowloon was like the real-life model for this concept. These days, the most crowded place on Earth is the city of Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Care for a peek into what it's like living there? Imagine the buzz of nearly double the crowd density of New York. We're talking more than 100,000 people packed into each square mile. Now add to this being on the Ring of Fire, that famous chain of volcanoes in the Pacific Ocean. This means locals often have to deal with earthquakes and storms too. Everyday life? Oh, it's one constant hustle. You're either navigating through bumper-to-bumper traffic or packed like sardines in buses and trains. More and more people are switching to motorbikes for a bit of extra wiggle room, but it's risky to be honest. Either way, you know what? People adapt. On most days, the city's hustle is just part of the routine. Take the kids for instance. They always find a way to have their fun, no matter how limited their playground options might be.
Now, I say Ice Age, and what do you imagine? I'm guessing you see our whole planet is frozen. It is eternal winter everywhere. Humans are hiding in their shelters, and only mammoths and saber-toothed tigers are slowly roaming the planet, looking for some food and greenery, and crazy squirrels are hunting for their one and only nut. Well, this last part I took from somewhere else. Anyway, these things are not true. Let's see what the real Ice Age looked like, how long it lasted, what the planet was like, and if we're anywhere close to another one like this. Now, we all say the Ice Age, which implies there was one massive period of snow and extreme cold the planet experienced. But there were several Ice Ages, at least 5 to be precise. The first Ice Age occurred between 2.4 and 2.1 billion years ago, and the last one was from 2.6 million years ago until 11,500 years ago. Some would even say that it lasts until today. I'll tell you why later. So it's relatively recent that the planet started to experience warmer temperatures, and what we call climate change could be the end of the most recent Ice Age. Yep, that's true. We might be living in the Ice Age. I bet you want to know what really was happening during those numerous Ice Ages Earth has experienced. Well, the first thing we need to know is that there are 2 stages of an Ice Age. The first one, the colder period, is called a glacial period. This is the period where temperatures drop low and glaciers start forming across the globe. The climate gets cool and dry, and the sea levels drop. That's because the water freezes into huge ice caps and stays trapped inside. And the difference is impressive. During Ice Ages, water levels were about 400 feet lower than today. That's the height of a 12-story building. Okay, so here's what happens. Temperatures drop and huge masses of the planet's water freeze into glaciers. With time, glaciers keep growing, expanding across Earth's surface. During the most recent glaciation, for example, the ice sheet spread across Canada, Greenland, Scandinavia, a sizable chunk of Eurasia, and even South America. That's quite a bit of the planet, but still not all of it. The planet didn't turn into a snowball like they show in epic movies. There were also warmer regions during the Ice Age. Of course, it was colder in the tropics and in Africa than we know it today, but not to the point of freezing. Overall, the planet got cooler by about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and a bit more than that in some naturally cold places like modern-day Canada, Scandinavia, and so on. So Africa was about 10 degrees colder than today. If today's temperature in that region is, on average, around 77 degrees Fahrenheit, back then it was 67 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a bit chilly for Africa, but overall quite nice, isn't it? And of course, people live there. Prior to the last Ice Age, humanity had already existed for 2.6 million years. So when it started, Earth was populated by early Homo sapiens and some other species, and they all lived in Africa. Well, in the beginning. Around 2 million years ago, humans started to move beyond the African continent, and not just to warm Java and other places in Southeast Asia, but to colder climates too. I mean, Europe, Scandinavia, all those places. And there, the temperature could get exceptionally low. Today, the annual average of, for example, Germany is 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Back then, it was 32. That's the yearly temperature of modern-day Iceland. And yet, for some reason, humans went all the way there and decided to settle. Not only did they survive, but they were thriving in that cold environment. But isn't it better to chill on the beach and drink some prehistoric pina colada? Well, that's what they did for the first several million years, and it didn't take humanity far. Maybe the cold encouraged us to develop. First, the harsh climate made humans adapt faster and get creative. It was cold. They needed to warm themselves up. So they invented the needle and started sewing and wearing clothes. Then they needed food. So they had to hunt. And they had to do it wisely if they wanted to outsmart their prey. That was a mental workout on a daily basis, which got brains moving and intelligence developing. Now, who did they hunt? Quite a few species disappeared during the Ice Age because they couldn't withstand the cold. But there were animals that were very cold resistant. For example, mammoths. Those huge creatures appeared 300,000 years ago and lived up until 10,000 years ago. So they existed for quite a while during the eternal winter and helped humans survive. Mammoths had a thick furry coat, which was an absolute gem to make warm clothes out of. Their bones were good for construction, and they were also, of course, a major source of food. Who do you think mammoths ate themselves? Well, they were vegetarians. They only ate grass and leaves. Those weren't easy to find during the Ice Age, but mammoths had a plan B. On their backs, they had backup lumps of stored fat, which allowed them to last longer without food if they had a few bad days when they couldn't find anything. There were also saber-toothed cats. They were quite widespread across the planet. You could find them on almost any continent. They were fearless predators, and few stood a chance against them, not even early humans, unless they could outsmart these wild cats. Saber-toothed cats went extinct after their main prey species disappeared. There were also giant sloths. No, make it bigger than this. They were really giant, standing 12 feet tall. This is about twice the height of an average modern-day man. And surprisingly, such big creatures only ate leaves and grass, just like mammoths. There were also giant beavers, reaching the size of an average modern-day human, 5.9 feet. Now, you might have noticed that everything was giant during that era. Well, actually, even before the Ice Age, animals were typically large. Think of dinosaurs, the most obvious example. It's not that animals were large back then, it's more that animals are small now. The reason is a mass extinction that started when the climate started to get warmer. Many species just couldn't adapt to higher temperatures. Plus, humans kept hunting them, which of course didn't help. So, no more mammoths or saber-toothed cats anymore. Even though I'm not feeling sorry for the latter, they were scary. Now instead, we have these. Ooh, what a cutie. But let's get back to those higher temperatures. That's part of any ice age, its second stage, and it's called the interglacial period. It's a warmer period when temperatures start to rise, glaciers begin to melt, and water levels rise too. Remember that the water level dropped as much as the height of a 12-story building. Well, during the interglacial period, it's all coming back, flooding what was once land. That's exactly the stage that scientists think started 11,500 years ago and is still lasting. Experts aren't sure how to determine exactly when the interglacial period starts. Historically, it happens at the peak of solar radiation in the northern hemisphere. It starts getting warmer, some glaciers begin to melt. This process releases CO2 that was trapped before from the ocean. The excess amount of CO2 adds to the warming of the atmosphere. It turns out it's a natural process that comes after every long ice age. Our planet has been freezing and melting all by itself long before the appearance of humans. But scientists also say that recent human activity in the last 150 years has played a key role in speeding up that process. You hear the word Paris, and a picture of the Eiffel Tower comes straight into your mind, or croissants. Or maybe you imagine going on a romantic stroll in the city of love, or croissants. But not many know that right below the bustling city of Paris, there is a series of underground passages, the catacombs. They're home to the remains of more than 6 million people. Whoa! But it wasn't always like that. Paris used to be a vast swamp. It was because most of the city was submerged in water at one time. Due to this, once the areas rose to the surface, the ground became rich in minerals, the most important being limestone. To extract it and use it to develop Paris, underground mines were dug up somewhere around the 14th century. They were dug horizontally to prevent collapse and to deal with the weight of the ceiling. Most of these mines were set up on the right side of the River Seine. Soon, Paris started expanding beyond its old city walls. Here's where it got tricky. The city started building on top of the land where they had dug all those tunnels. This caused some big problems, like the ground collapsing. In 1774, one of the roads in the suburbs collapsed about 100 feet into the ground. Due to rising safety concerns, officials decided to abandon the mines. The quarries were checked, and the tunnels were renovated to avoid future disasters. The bones ended up in the tunnels because of another major problem Paris faced a few years later. The growing population of the city caused an increase in the number of bodies. Cemeteries became overcrowded, and the city was actually so bad that at one point, bodies could not be taken care of properly. They started to rot and spread harmful bacteria. So, those who were in charge of Paris got an idea. They picked a new spot that was like a secret hideout for bones, one of the old mines. The process of moving the bones from cemeteries to the tunnel started in the late 1780s. They began with the biggest cemetery in Paris, the Saint-Innocent Cemetery. They didn't want to scare people, so they moved the bones at night. The remains went into 2 big holes in the ground and then got stacked in the tunnels by the quarry workers. They continued moving the bones until Paris developed into a city in the 1860s. The official name given to the collection of mines turned cemetery was the Paris Municipal Ossuary. But this name never became popular, and the tunnels instead became known as the catacombs. While the bones were still being added to the collection, the officials saw fit to open the place for public viewing in the year 1809. Tourists had to make a prior appointment and sign a guest book. As time passed, famous people started visiting, including the future King Charles X, Austrian Emperor Francis I, and Napoleon III. Of course, the rules for visiting have been changing over time. But now the catacombs, also known as the Ossuary of Denfert-Rochereau, have become a famous tourist spot. Around 5 million people come to explore it every year. What drives them? Well, in addition to the creepy but rich history, the catacombs are also considered one of the most haunted places on Earth, and there are several unsolved mysteries surrounding them. Some years back, a camcorder was discovered in the catacombs with a bit of footage. ABC Family showed the video in their documentary. In the clip, you can see a man very deep inside the catacombs, exploring alone. The video is from his point of view, and he sees something strange. He runs away terrified and eventually drops his camera. What happened to this man is still unknown. He was never found or identified. There are also reports of people getting lost in the catacombs, the most famous being a doorkeeper who got lost in 1793. His body was found 11 years later near an exit. How he passed away remains a mystery. There are also some not-so-eerie but equally strange mysteries surrounding the catacombs. There are people who like exploring the tunnels on their own. They're known as cataphiles. These people go into the quarries that have been abandoned to the public and long forgotten. Some explorers discovered secret water pools in the abandoned areas, and people would go to take a dip there. In 2004, police patrolling an unexplored area came across a 5,300 square foot cavern with a movie theater. There was a screen, projection equipment, some classic movies, and even chairs. There was also a restaurant-like setting nearby, 3 telephone lines, and, well, electricity, which hinted that a group of people had been living there or regularly visiting. But when the police came back 3 days later with experts to find the source of the electricity, they found that the wire had been cut off. Only a note was left behind: "Do not try to find us." Such enthusiasts existed in the past, too. Once, a Parisian farmer did the same and came across button mushrooms growing in the catacombs. He saw an opportunity to make easy money, and he actually created mushroom farms in the tunnels. He even got official permission for it. By 1950, 100 farmers had been working inside growing mushrooms. There's also a scary legend about the catacombs that some people believe in. According to it, at midnight, unexplainable voices can be heard in the catacombs. They try to convince people to go further inside the catacombs until they can't find their way out. There's no strong evidence whether this story is true or not, but thinking about it is still scary. Due to safety issues, today, only a small part of the catacombs can be legally toured by the public, less than 2 miles, while the catacombs go on for 200 miles. And still, the tour is an hour long, and it perfectly captures what's worth seeing. Solo traveling is extremely dangerous, as there is the possibility of getting lost. No thanks. In 2017, 2 teenagers entered the system through a secret passage. They were found 3 days later and had to be treated for hypothermia. The tunnels, damp and old, have an average temperature of 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Keep in mind that the entrance alone is uncomfortable enough to turn some people away. To get inside, you have to go down a winding staircase that takes you a little more than 65 feet below the surface. In the beginning, you find yourself in a well-lit room filled with interesting information and displays. But as you move forward, the place gets eerily silent. You pass through a creepy entrance that boldly declares this in French, which when translated English is something like, "Stop, this is the Empire of Doom." It's not exactly a warm welcome, and that's because the Paris catacombs are known for their haunted reputation. As you move deeper, the sounds of the world above fade away, and soon you are surrounded by the silence of the earth below. The bones themselves are placed strategically, almost in artistic patterns. This was the idea of a man who was once in charge of the place. He turned the bones into a kind of underground museum with cool structures like columns, plaques, altars, and even some weirdly shaped forms that some people consider art. Popular all year round, the catacombs become particularly loaded around Halloween. People organize special parties or events near the place too. But the most bizarre thing was offered by the catacombs themselves through Airbnb. The famous rental service allowed 2 guests to sleep in the catacombs. They were offered a bed for Halloween night and breakfast. Upon checking in, they were told tales and the history of the catacombs. This way, they went to bed fully aware of the fact that they were sleeping among the remains of 6 million people. Yes, it remains to be seen. What makes a giant, well, a giant? You know, big, enormous, you get it. Tough questions. It depends on who you ask. The ancient Greeks had cyclops, while ogres were spread out through all sorts of European folklore tales. The tallest person ever recorded was named Robert Pershing Wadlow, and he lived in the first half of the 20th century. He stood at an incredible 8 feet 11 inches tall, but had many medical issues throughout his life. Sadly, he only lived to celebrate his 22nd birthday. That's because Robert wasn't just tall. He had a condition affecting his human growth hormone, which didn't particularly make his life comfortable. Robert even had to wear leg braces in his adult years. During that same time, incredible discoveries were reported in North America. Some people claim to have uncovered weird-looking skeletons, much larger than previously associated with human beings. It immediately raised the question, did giants really used to roam our planet? Our story begins with the idea of a mound builder race. Some scientists back in the day claimed that these massive earthworks in places like the Mississippi Valley, called the Grave Creek Mound or the Great Serpent Mound, were built by some sort of prehistoric type of human, much larger and stronger than us Homo sapiens are today. From around 1812 to the 1860s, almost everyone in America writing about history was covering this mound-building race. However, not everyone agreed with the theory. There was this naturalist named Benjamin Smith Barton, for example, who warned about jumping to conclusions about giants. He believed that just because people discovered some big bones, they shouldn't immediately think of giants. But people didn't listen. Really? They simply wanted to believe about huge human-like creatures, despite not having any real scientific evidence. Newspapers were filled with these giant stories. They described finding giant skeletons, even featuring weird body parts. Con artists took advantage of the whole frenzy, with some putting together skeletons out of wood and rawhide and touring them as proof of the long-lost race of giants. Eventually, in the 1930s, an anthropologist from the Smithsonian took it upon himself to debunk the whole mystery. And his conclusions were straightforward. All those giant skeletons that were supposedly uncovered were either hoaxes or simply animal bones that were wrongly identified as belonging to humans. He also said that those who claimed to have discovered ancient giant remains were just not that good with human anatomy. You would think that's how the story ended. Well, it didn't. You see, people became so convinced that giants existed that they simply could not let go. Sound familiar? Because the Smithsonian was investigating these claims, some people started thinking they were up to something shady. They cooked up this theory that the Smithsonian scientists were secretly getting rid of giant bones to hide the truth about giants. This whole story survived through the years and made it all the way to 2014. Is when this internet article said that the Smithsonian used to have tons of giant skeletons but destroyed them back in the early 1900s. And the drama continued. A famed publication even looked into the past of some of those Smithsonian scholars to try and pick apart their credibility. So the institute had to do some damage control. They've since added new people on the team whose job is to figure out if those bones were correctly collected and studied. Now, it wasn't just North Americans that claimed to have stumbled upon giants. The French had their own discoveries too. Their story takes us back to 1890, when an anthropologist was digging around a Bronze Age site in Castelnau, France. What he found were 3 bone pieces that looked like they came from a giant human. The findings included a massive thigh bone, a shin bone, and a regular upper arm bone known as a humerus. Now, if we put all these bones together and calculate the proportions, they lead us to this towering figure, somewhere between 10 and 11 feet tall. However, in 2022, contemporary scientists took another look at those bones. They concluded they most likely belonged to a cave bear, not a human. It wasn't that unusual for people back in the day to confuse giant animal bones with those of humans. Now, the truth is, our ancestors were in fact taller than we are today, despite them not being technically giants. The average human body has changed a lot over thousands of years. We're not as big and strong as our ancestors were. In fact, we've been on a bit of a downsizing trend, especially in the last 10,000 years, and it's because of a mix of factors. Our genes, the world around us, and how we live our lives all play a role. Way back around 40,000 years ago, European men were towering at around 6 feet. They had a seriously tough life, though, hunting and gathering all day. That lifestyle required a good muscle structure, and their African roots might have given them that extra height, which came in handy in warm climates. Moving on to 10,000 years ago, we can already see a big change in European males. They went down to 5 feet 4 inches on average. What happened was the climate was shifting, and people were increasingly relying on agriculture to provide for their families. It wasn't all sunshine and comfort, though. Sometimes failed crops and a not-so-diverse food meant a pretty unhealthy diet. Plus, being around farm animals more and more introduced some new medical issues to the mix. We're now around 600 years ago when the shortness continued. And yes, we can still blame it on poor diet and health. However, there seems to be a change in recent years. Today, European males are reaching an average of 5 feet 9 inches. And sure, the fact that we're eating more veggies and getting regular checkups at the doctor did help a lot. But it's also because of industrialization and living in cities. This has brought people from different backgrounds together, which is a good thing. It decreases the chances of human passing on genes that could cause problems. So, it's a combination of better living and genetics that's making us taller. We shouldn't give up on ancient giants quite yet, though. You see, experts believe they recently discovered the remains of such a person, who supposedly lived in ancient Egypt. Sometimes people can actually grow to large sizes due to a condition called gigantism, the same that made Robert Pershing Wadlow grow to such an impressive height. When some archaeologists were studying ancient Egyptian mummies, they came upon an interesting skeleton. What made it special was that they believed it might have belonged to a pharaoh, who would have been really tall, like 6 feet 6 inches tall. To put that in perspective, that's way taller than Ramses II, who was the tallest recorded Egyptian pharaoh and stood at about 5 feet 9 inches. These experts took a closer look at the newly found bones, especially the long ones, and found evidence of something called exuberant growth, which basically means this person's growth was off the charts. It's a clear sign of gigantism, they say. Now, this discovery is important because it makes this mummy the oldest case of gigantism in the world. No other Egyptian pharaohs were known to be giants. It's also fascinating because it tells us something about the health and nutrition of ancient Egyptian rulers. See, those pharaohs were probably better fed and healthier than regular people, which might explain why they could grow taller than the average person. Now, you might be wondering if being a giant had any drawbacks back then. Well, it's hard to say. I wasn't around then. Still, during those early dynasties in Egypt, they seemed to prefer shorter people, especially in royal service. There are a lot of ancient Egyptian stories featuring short-statured leaders and even higher spirits that locals looked up to. The reason why is still a mystery that we might never fully solve. But since this mummy was found in an elite tomb, it's possible that being a giant didn't have a social stigma attached to it at the time. Maybe he was, in fact, seen as special.
2 centuries ago, a 31-year-old Frenchman stormed into his brother's office in Paris. He had only one thing to share. "I've got it!" The man was so excited that he immediately collapsed. He spent the next 5 days in bed recovering his health. Who was this mysterious person, and why was he so thrilled? Jean-François Champollion made one of the greatest scientific breakthroughs in human history. He had cracked the code of Egyptian hieroglyphs. This enabled scientists to finally unravel the secrets of this ancient civilization. They weren't able to read hieroglyphs for nearly 2,000 years. After the Romans took over Egypt, the intricate writing system slowly faded away from people's minds. The last of the hieroglyphic texts date back to the 4th century. For thousands of years, Egyptians used images to show their lives. But the knowledge of how to read these pictures was lost to modern science. The story of hieroglyphs began in 3250 before current era. That's when ancient Egyptians developed writing. Their motivation was to better organize the distribution and storage of goods. One of the earliest examples is a ceramic jar that had an inscription in black ink. There were 2 major writing systems. The first were the hieroglyphs, which literally means sacred carving. Egyptians carved hieroglyphs in stone on temples, tombs, and similar monuments for 3,000 years. They present a system of pictorial texts. A pictograph is a picture or a drawing that stands for an idea of a word. It's a precursor to the true writing as we have it today. For example, when Egyptians wanted to write ibis, they would draw a small image of the bird. Hieroglyphs can be found on walls. They were a formal way of writing. The other writing system was hieratic. Egyptians mostly used it when writing on papyrus. That's an early, thicker form of the paper we have today. It soon evolved into demotic. This improved version became the most common writing systems in ancient Egypt. Then, in the early 4th century BCE, Alexander the Great took control of Egypt. This was the time when the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty ruled the country. You've probably heard of the last ruler of this dynasty, Cleopatra. During her time, Egyptian Demotic and Greek were used side by side. The two started mixing, and by the year 100, a new language emerged, Coptic. It slowly replaced the ancient writing system. Only Egyptian priests used hieroglyphs for the next couple of centuries, and then their meaning was lost to history. But not forever. Arabs were the first who tried to solve the mystery of the hieroglyphs. Medieval travelers came across these strange symbols and wanted to understand their meaning. They consulted speakers of Coptic and translated text from Greek and Latin into Arabic to break the code of the hieroglyphs. During the Renaissance, Europeans also became fascinated with the legacy of ancient Egypt. Scholars from the Old Continent believed that hieroglyphs were a group of symbols as opposed to a written language. This was all about to change in 1799. A year earlier, Napoleon, the famous French ruler, arrived in Egypt. His subordinates constructed a fort that dated back to the 15th century. Rashid, or Rosetta, was a port town in the northeast of Egypt, near Alexandria. One section of the old fortification wall contained an interesting slab inside. The stone tablet was made of a granite-like rock. It was just 40 inches high and 30 inches wide. It contained 3 distinctive sections of text carved into it. The letters were in 3 scripts and 2 languages: hieroglyphs, Demotic, and Greek. It was a fragment of a larger ancient stela. These are upright stone slabs that are used to dedicate to a person or an event, but the one from Rosetta was damaged. 2/3 of the hieroglyphic text on the top was missing. The bottom Greek text lacked a cornerstone. The only fully preserved section was the writing in Demotic in the middle of the slab. It eventually ended up in the British Museum. The scientific community was intrigued, and the race was on to decipher it. Prints and casts of the slab went out all over Europe. Scholars already knew ancient Greek, so in theory, this shouldn't have been so hard. The first people who saw the Rosetta Stone thought the process would take 2 weeks. In the end, it took 2 decades. The main issue was the fact that hieroglyphs and spoken ancient Egyptian didn't have a connection anymore. Scientists didn't know what sounds the letters on the slab corresponded to. Imagine if English disappeared 1,000 years in the future. Then someone finds a tablet with the word dog. At first, they wouldn't know how to read the word or the individual letters. Even if they figured out how to pronounce the word, they wouldn't know its meaning. This is what linguists were dealing with in the case of the Rosetta Stone. The careful study of the artifact produced another find. The texts weren't direct translations of each other. They both described the same event, but in different words. It was like you saw a movie with 2 friends, and then all 3 of you wrote different reviews about it. The original text was probably in Greek, but the translators added extra words to make it sound more Egyptian. An English physician and physicist, Thomas Young, made the first great breakthrough. He knew that the name Ptolemy appeared several times in the text based on the Greek translation. This wasn't an Egyptian name, so it was impossible to represent it with a single image. The only way to spell out this Greek name was to use symbols that sound like it when produced. This is called transliteration, and we have it today as well. This is how foreign-sounding words are written down in Chinese or some Slavic languages. Young focused on sets of hieroglyphs in oval frames. These are called cartouches. He experimented a bit but finally discovered that one of them read, Ptolemy the Great. The individual hieroglyphs that made up this name corresponded to sounds needed to produce it. This is where our mysterious man from the beginning of the video enters the picture. Champollion picked up where Young left off. He knew Coptic, so the Frenchman was able to determine what many other hieroglyphs sounded like. The eureka moment was close. It came while he was studying a cartouche from a site dedicated to Ramses II. It had 4 symbols. The last 2 were the same. He determined this was the sound S. The first symbol was the sun. This is Ra or Re in Coptic. So the cartouche read Ra something SS. Can you already guess the name? Of course, it's Ramses. This breakthrough finally cracked the code. Ancient Egyptian wasn't a mishmash of cool-looking images. It was a phonetic language that Jean-François Champollion discovered in September of 1822. The stone slab is today known as the Decree of Memphis. The Egyptian Council issued it in this city in the year 196 before current era. In it, they expressed their loyalty to the pharaoh. They erected identical stelae and temples all across Egypt. The Rosetta Stone was just one copy of them, but its content is less important than the fact that Champollion's translation gave these ancient peoples their voice again. During the 1800s, European scholars didn't think that the Egyptian civilization was much older than classical Greek or Roman. Now that scientists could read hieroglyphs, a whole new chapter of human history opened. One of the most famous finds in the history of archaeology happened in 1922. That's when the British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. The whole world admired King Tut's golden mask. But without Champollion's pioneering work, it would be impossible to know who its owner was. The young pharaoh's cartouche is phonetic. For instance, you pronounce the pictograph of a chick as the vowel U. The symbol for the key of life is an ankh, and there is a shepherd's crook in the end. It symbolizes the word ruler. Turns out, King Arthur, who held court in the legendary Camelot, Merlin the Magician, and the gallant Round Table Knights are not just legends. Well, that's at least what some researchers think. Historian John Griffith Davies believed that King Arthur was actually a real person who got wounded in a battle about 1,500 years ago. He was probably a man named Brennan Athrews. This person was a real military leader back in the day. He supposedly led the fight against the Saxons. Now, a lot of fellas like to think that Somerset was King Arthur's turf. You know, the place where he ruled from. Some people think that Cadbury Castle Hill was his Camelot, and Glastonbury was said to be his final resting spot. But the historian disagrees. He believes that Camelot was actually in Caerleon, South Wales, which was a big Roman city with a huge population. King Arthur, or in this case, Brennan Athrews, was a powerful leader ruling over parts of southwest England and Wales. He was blending the Roman and British cultures together. The historian dived into old records and manuscripts, especially ones from around the 6th century. He says that the whole King Arthur legend was twisted by a French writer who added his own flair to the story around 1165. So, King Arthur, or rather Brennan Athrews, was a Romanized Briton who had some fights and made his mark in history. Those tales of his heroic escapades got mixed with legends over the years. Centuries later, in the 1960s, archaeologists excavated Cadbury Castle. They found all sorts of stuff, like an Iron Age hill fort that got a major upgrade during Arthur's supposed time. They dug up bits of a hall and what seemed like an old church, as well as an ancient track leading from the hill. They called it Arthur's hunting track. So yeah, King Arthur wasn't just a hero from an epic, there's also some real history in there. The historical basis of the legend suggests that Arthur might have been inspired by another historical figure named Arturus. This man led the Celtic Britons against the Anglo-Saxons in the 5th century. Another theory claims that Arthur had a father named Ambrosius Aurelianus. The time from Ambrosius's departure to Arthur's passing was full of ups and downs. Because things were not clear during this time, different places in Britain said that they had some kind of connection to Arthur. And since different people studied old writings and records, in time, the story of the king changed. That's why Arthur's name is now connected to various landmarks. The presumed location of Camelot can be Somerset, Winchester, or Caerleon in South Wales. Another potential site is Tintagel Castle in Cornwall. There, in the late 1980s, people discovered a 1,500-year-old slate fragment with Latin inscriptions. Around Tintagel, people still come to see the marks of King Arthur's reign. The Earl of Cornwall's castle from the 13th century gets about 250,000 visitors yearly. And in the summer, there are around 3,000 visitors daily. Many of them actually believe they're looking at King Arthur's castle. The village of Tintagel has turned into a sort of theme park. You can stay at the huge Camelot Castle Hotel, buy souvenirs at the Pendragon gift shop, or have a drink and a Cornish pasty at the King Arthur's Arms Inn. Over in North Cornwall, a tour guide talks about a bunch of places claiming King Arthur and his people could have used them. But then, there's a stone enclosure on the spooky Bodmin Moor that some people say was a special spot for Arthur-related ceremonies. Not too far, about 5 miles southeast of Tintagel, there's a place called Slaughterbridge. This village claims its own piece of the Arthur tale. There's a family that has owned a big piece of land here for 3 generations. They insist this is where the Battle of Camlan happened. It was supposedly Arthur's last big fight. These claims are largely based on Geoffrey of Monmouth's chronicles. He was a cleric from Monmouth, Wales, and one of the figures in the development of British historiography. He talked about this battle as the final showdown between Arthur and his nephew Mordred, who rebelled against him. Geoffrey wrote that Arthur was pretty upset that Mordred kept slipping away, so Arthur followed him to the River Camlan, where they faced off. Many people in various locations claim to have solved the puzzle, and many places claim to be a part of the legend of Arthur. The spark also might have come as early as the 7th and 8th centuries. Tales speak of Arthur even earlier than that. He is described as a warrior who faced Saxon invaders during the 5th and 6th centuries. His father, King Uther Pendragon, plunged Excalibur into a rock, whispering that only his rightful heir could pull that sword out. That sword is the Stone of Destiny. What does that mean? In Irish royal terms, it's like the crown, the king's best friend. And this whole sword and stone dance? It's like a symbolic matrimony between the king and the goddess of sovereignty. The tale symbolizes the union between the king and the goddess. The Scottish people, particularly those in the Highlands, initially hailed from Ireland and established themselves in that region as early as the 1st century. Yet, by the 6th century, these settlers who brought their customs and traditions with them desired independence from the Irish monarchs. In the year 574, Aidan MacGabran received the crown as the monarch of the Scots. And his son's name is? Yes, Arthur, like the legendary King Arthur. This Arthur had a sister named Morgana, and his fate was sealed by a man named Mordred during the Battle of Camden. The term Camlan might stem from the Gaelic expression Cam Allen, signifying a bend along the River Allen. Arthur ruled from a locale called Camla, which somewhat sounds like Camelot, right? It's claimed that he lies buried along the banks of the River Allen. The Gaelic term for the River Allen is Aben Allen, which has a similar pronunciation to Avalon. It's also said that King Arthur's final resting place is Avalon. King Arthur's narrative resembles the Irish king Cormac MacArt and the Cup of Truth. The story of Sir Gwen and the Green Knight mirrors the encounter between Irish hero Cuchulainn and a warrior clad in green. There are more similarities. Just as King Arthur and his knights were said to rest in an undisclosed location, ready to awaken and protect the land in the future, Irish hero Finn McCummell and his warriors are said to be resting in a cave, prepared to rise and defend Ireland in hard times. In some early versions of the legend, the king protects his reign from many supernatural elements like giants, witches, and dragons. Yet, potentially, the second important figure in this legend is Merlin. He could be the most famous wizard ever. Surprise, he might be based on a real person too. Well, maybe not based, but inspired. The source of Merlin's persona can be a Welsh poet named Myrddin Wyllt, who lived in the woods in lowland Scotland. Or maybe Merlin was inspired by a French saint. We cannot really know unless we invent a time machine. In the 12th century, a poet added a new dimension to the legend. This version portrays Arthur as a young Arthur, abandoned by his father and raised in obscurity. When the king passes away without an heir, England falls into chaos as nobles fight for the throne. They turn to Merlin for guidance. Merlin sets a challenge for Arthur to pull the sword from the stone. After many people fail, he succeeds on his 15th birthday. Then, he becomes the rightful king of England. Legends about King Arthur are a big part of our cultural code. We meet with this medieval world in our childhood. This narrative includes the allure of Excalibur, sorcery, and love. Other characters, such as the Lady of the Lake, contribute to the richness and complexity of the Arthurian legend. Now you know that there are real people that inspired the legend. The profession of a travel blogger is far more ancient than you can imagine. Yeah, the first ones appeared around 2,500 years ago. Meet Herodotus, historian, travel blogger, genius, billionaire, philanthropist. Just kidding. Herodotus had been all over the place, and by the time he hit 60, he had seen more spots than anyone else on Earth. As Instagram wasn't around yet, he had to whip out his papyrus and wrote what we now know as the first ever travel guide, the Histories. In his book, he spilled the tea on people, places, animals, and plants. He was particularly fond of Egypt. By the way, most of the stuff Herodotus described is still there, so his guide is not that outdated, even today. If you're ever in Egypt, you can actually check out the same monuments and sites Herodotus saw. One spot that Herodotus cruised to was Lake Moeris down the Nile. This place was legit, a freshwater lake that got its water straight from the Nile. There was this city called Crocodipolis chilling on its shores. Yep, there were a lot of crocodiles there. That city is also still around today, just under a different name, Fayum. Right in the middle of Lake Moeris, there were two giant pyramids that took Herodotus' breath away. Here comes the mystery. At the moment, these two pyramids are gone. Seems like, according to the travel guide, we're missing two Egyptian pyramids. Herodotus claimed Lake Moeris was man-made, like someone dug it up with their bare hands. He thought so because there were two pyramids smack dab in the middle of the lake. But let's face it, it would have been physically impossible to build something like that in a natural lake. I mean, the ancient Egyptians were pretty advanced, but they definitely didn't have scuba divers and all the essential equipment back then. The pyramids were 50 fathoms above the surface and another 50 fathoms below. Just to give you an idea, 1 fathom equals 6 feet, so those pyramids were around 600 feet tall. That's taller than the famous Pyramid of Giza. And while the Pyramid of Giza has a modest little capstone, these twin pyramids had statues of pharaohs chilling on top. That's why you've never heard of them, and there are only a couple of drawings depicting them. So what happened? Well, time is ruthless. Take the Great Labyrinth Herodotus mentioned, for example. Nowadays, it's just a pile of rubble and cobwebs. Even the once magnificent Lake Moeris has changed. The water there has turned salty, and now it's just a fraction of its original size. Sure, change is inevitable, but you would think pyramids would stand strong against the test of time, right? Their unique designs make them super durable. So where are these pyramids now? Well, chances are they never actually existed. We all know that some travel bloggers tend to exaggerate, right? Herodotus was no exception. While some people call him the father of history, others call him the father of lies. Ouch! Yeah, his books have false or unverified information sometimes. For example, he totally blew up the size of the Pyramid of Giza in his guidebook. He doubled its size. But hey, cut the guy some slack. In the pre-Google era when our travel blogger lived, fact-checking was pretty complicated, especially for Herodotus, who couldn't even read those funky Egyptian hieroglyphics. He had to rely on the locals for info. Those inconsistencies in Herodotus' book might be just one epic prank pulled by mischievous locals on a clueless tourist. Classic. However, there are actually some legit monuments at the site. The pedestals of Baiamu are the leftover bases of two ginormous statues built by the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Amenemhat III. These ruins used to grace the shores of Lake Moeris, but now they chill in the Fayum Oasis, about 4 miles north of Fayum City. The first time these statues were mentioned was by, you guessed it right, the Greek historian Herodotus, who was around in the 5th century BCE. Remember the description? Herodotus said there were two pyramids that soared 50 fathoms above the water surface, and each pyramid had a massive statue sitting on the throne at the top. We have the statues, but not the pyramids. Weird, right? There's an explanation, though. Some scientists believe that Herodotus probably wrote about these statues during a time when the area was flooded. But hey, it's not just Herodotus who spun this tale. Diodorus the Sicilian and Pliny the Elder also jumped on the bandwagon, repeating similar claims about these colossal statues. However, let's not forget that Herodotus might have been a bit lazy. He never actually got up close and personal with the statues. He just saw them from across the lake. So picture this: hazy silhouettes in the distance and Herodotus' imagination running wild with their grandeur. The description matches, except for the height. While Lake Moeris pyramids seem to be a myth debunked, there's another mystery waiting to be unveiled. Some time ago, archaeology researcher Angela Mickle dropped a crazy discovery. She claimed to have found not one, but two lost pyramid sites in Egypt. The craziest part is that she didn't even have to leave her couch to find them. She basically found those pyramids online. After spending 10 years studying Google Earth, Angela managed to pinpoint these two areas along the Nile Basin. They're about 90 miles apart, and both have some funky-shaped mounds. The first one is chilling by the Nile in Upper Egypt, just 12 miles away from Abu Sidoum. The second one, 90 miles north, has a 140 feet wide four-sided shape. The second site even has a massive triangular plateau that's a staggering 620 feet wide. Angela wrote on Google Earth Anomalies back in 2012, saying that the mound looked super flat on top and had a crazy symmetrical triangular shape that had been worn away over time. And the second site? It got this square center that's totally out of the ordinary for a mound this size. It almost looks like a pyramid when you see it from above. But not everyone is convinced. Some Egyptologists say these mounds are just geological features called buttes. Apparently, they're pretty common in the local Fayum Desert. These buttes form when sediment piles up and there's a stubborn layer that doesn't want to erode. So when the surrounding sediment washes away, that tough layer stays put and makes the hill all flat. Still, this one's just a theory as of now. By the way, Egyptian archaeologists just made one more incredible discovery. This time, it's not a theory, but an actual site. In January 2023, they found a complete residential city from the Roman era right in the heart of Luxor, a southern city in Egypt. This ancient city, dating back 1800 years to the 2nd and 3rd centuries, is actually the oldest and most important city ever found on the eastern bank of Luxor. The archaeologists uncovered a bunch of awesome stuff during their excavations. They found several residential buildings, 2 pigeon towers that were used to house pigeons or doves, and even some metal workshops. Inside those workshops, they stumbled upon a treasure trove of pots, tools, and Roman coins made of bronze and copper. It's like a real-life time capsule. This kind of find is pretty rare in Egypt. Usually, they come across temples and tombs during excavations, especially on Luxor's west bank, where the famous Valley of the Queens and Valley of the Kings are located. But this time, it's all about this amazing residential city. And get this, back in April 2021, they announced the discovery of a lost golden city on Luxor's West Bank that's 3,000 years old. The archaeological team called it the largest ancient city ever found in Egypt. It's like they're uncovering hidden treasures left and right.
There are only white dazzling plains and glaciers washed by icy Arctic waters. It's so cold here that tears turn into icicles within seconds. Over 100 sailors are trying to build a fire and find food. There's less and less hope for survival left because all these experienced people know that no one will come to save them. The world's most modern and technologically equipped ships, created for sailing through such places, are stuck in the Arctic ice near the group. These people were sure that they could defeat nature in these regions, but in the end, they got trapped. Terrible events are awaiting them in the next few days or even weeks, and over the following decades, the whole world will try to solve the mystery of the disappearance of this expedition. So it all started in 1845 when HMS Erebus and HMS Terror set off from the Thames on a great Arctic voyage. The British Admiralty wanted to lay a route between the Atlantic and the Pacific through the ice bays of Canada. The trip had two goals, economic and scientific. Britain wanted to study Earth's north magnetic pole better to understand geomagnetic science. This was also an important step in creating maritime navigation in that region. The Europeans hoped to pave the Northwest Passage to open cheap and safe trade routes with China. The exchange of goods, such as silk, spices, and others, would significantly improve Britain's economy and strengthen diplomatic relations with the eastern region. Such an ambitious goal required ambitious preparation, so the country created two of the best and most technologically advanced ships of that time. The hulls of the ship were covered with additional iron layers of protection to withstand collisions with icebergs. Engineers installed air passages connected to the central heating system inside the cabins of the crew members so that none of the sailors would freeze. The massive amount of coal in the cargo hold was supposed to maintain a warm temperature all over the ship for a long time. Also, for a comfortable trip, the team took food stocks that would be enough for 3 years and many books to keep their minds in good shape. But the main technical attribute was steam engines, a new technology for that time, especially for marine shipbuilding. The engines were supposed to ensure the movement of ships in case of windless weather. Erebus and Terror were the most protected and unsinkable ships of that time. Imagine if you compare them with ordinary wooden boats with sails. The crew of both vessels consisted of strong travelers and sailors, and experienced officer Sir John Franklin led the entire expedition. Ready for the difficulties and harsh conditions of the Arctic, the crew boarded Erebus and Terror and sailed from the English village of Greenhithe. John Franklin was supposed to enter the Northwest Passage through the upper part of North America, sail through uncharted Arctic waters, and, in the rays of glory, go out into the Pacific Ocean. 3 months after the beginning of the journey, the ships were spotted in Baffin Bay east of the passage's entrance. No one saw them after that. At that time, there was no radio communication between the ships, and the crew members couldn't report a problem. They also couldn't get out of the ice and sail back, and couldn't send lifeboats to inform people about their troubles. They found themselves in a desperate situation. A couple of years later, it became obvious that something had happened to Erebus and Terror. Still, Britain didn't send other ships to rescue the missing expedition. 3 years after the start of their mission, Captain Franklin's wife, Jane Franklin, demanded to send a new journey to find the lost ships. Over the next 10 years, the United Kingdom and the United States organized more than 30 voyages to the Northwest Passage. However, they were unsuccessful. Erebus and Terror and their crews were still missing. By then, the news about the unsuccessful expedition had spread all over Britain. Humanity has spent more than 160 years searching for clues about what happened to the crews of the two ships. and we still don't have an accurate picture of what happened. During all these years, researchers have found strange clues, raising more questions than answers. For example, a document called Victory Point Note was found on the shore of King William Island. It was a page from a logbook with 2 handwritten messages. The first note stated that the expedition had been going according to plan. Franklin successfully commanded people, and there were no problems. The second recording was made a year after the first. By that time, the crews had been doing much worse. Franklin and 24 sailors didn't survive. HMS Erebus and Terror got stuck in the ice near King William Island, and the entire crew was forced to leave them. What happened to them next remains a mystery. They had little chance of surviving among the endless ice and strong winds. Also, according to one theory, their situation worsened because they consumed food with high lead levels. But most likely, after their food supplies had run out, they went to look for help and got lost in the snowy plains. Another strange artifact of this expedition is the Peglar Papers. During one of the expeditions in 1860, researchers found a notebook in German. What was written there remains an unencrypted message. Some words were written backwards, and others were smeared. Those sentences that specialists managed to read didn't make sense. The lines contained incoherent words like "shan't want some grog to wet our whistle," "all my art, Tom, for I don't think for," and other similar messages. It's possible that the author of the letter was delirious and didn't understand what was happening. But some researchers believe the note may contain encrypted information about what happened to the crew members. A months-long stay in an icy land, where snow and sun dazzle your eyes during the whole day, and at night the wind penetrates to the bones, can drive anyone crazy. But the most terrible thing in such a situation is the clear understanding that there will likely be no salvation. Erebus and Horror were the most advantaged ships. It seemed unlikely that, at the time, another boat would have been able to go as far as they did. The last people who saw the crew members alive were the local Inuit tribes living in these snowy plains. During the expeditions to find Franklin's team, one of the Inuits told how they had met a group of Europeans almost 300 miles east of King William Island. But it is still unknown what kind of relationships between the sailors and the locals were. In an icy land, hunting is necessary for survival. Now imagine that about 100 people sailed to the island and found themselves trapped. They began to catch deer, thereby depriving the locals of food. Who knows what kind of conflict it could trigger? In 2014, Canada organized an expedition to where the ships were supposedly stuck. The researchers managed to find HMS Erebus at the ocean bottom using the latest equipment. And 2 years later, during a new expedition, experts found Terror lying under tons of icy water northwest of Erebus. However, according to the found notes, the crews of both ships abandoned the vessels in a different place than where they were actually found. Erebus lay 60 miles south of the location indicated in the records. It's hard to believe that an undercurrent could move such giant ships. Perhaps the crew members abandoned the ship, wrote about it in their diary, but then decided to return. They sailed a short distance and left the vessel again. But the second time, they didn't specify their location. According to another version, giant drifting glaciers could move the ships from their original place. The history of the Franklin expedition attracts many historians and researchers worldwide. Even now, people organize expensive, dangerous expeditions in search of answers. There are Inuit witnesses, notes, dozens of versions, and discovered ships, but there is still no complete idea of what happened to the brave navigators. Imagine a place that could literally start at one end, trek over 1,800 miles straight to the west, and still be stuck under that massive canopy. This place is like a haven for all sorts of crazy creatures, hosting around 10% of the world's species. It's always been seen as this wild, untouched paradise where humans haven't messed things up yet. You know, like a glimpse into how the world used to be before we spread like wildfire across every continent, causing chaos everywhere. I'm talking about the Amazon region. That massive jungle turns out to be hiding some seriously cool secrets. For centuries, people have been talking about these lost cities deep within the forest. We're talking about El Dorado, the legendary city of gold that had Spanish explorers going crazy, venturing into uncharted territory, never to return. And even in the 20th century, the adventurous Perry Fawcett went looking for the lost city of Z and disappeared into the jungle, leaving us all hanging. Scientists have actually found evidence that ancient cities did exist in the Amazon. But how did they find these hidden ruins in such a dense and remote forest? Well, they've got this awesome technology called LiDAR. Basically, they hopped into a helicopter and used light-based remote sensing to digitally strip away the canopy and reveal the ancient ruins of a massive urban settlement around Llanos de Mojos in the Bolivian Amazon. The place was once home to the Kasarabi culture, which thrived from 500 to 1400 CE. They had these incredible urban centers with huge platform and pyramid structures. They even had raised causeways connecting different suburban-like settlements spread across miles and miles of land. These guys were seriously ahead of their time, and they had an epic water control and distribution system with reservoirs and canals. So yeah, the Amazon rainforest wasn't just some untouched wilderness. It was actually heavily populated and even urbanized for centuries before recorded history of the region began. But the thing is, a bunch of people turned a blind eye to the fact that there were actually some pretty cool architectural sites lurking around here that totally deserve some exploring. Scientists predict that in the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to uncover a ton of these cities, and some might even be bigger than the ones we're talking about here. Michael Heckenberger, an anthropologist with the University of Florida, points out that we've seen some similar settlement features, like moats and causeways, in other parts of the ancient Amazon. This new research reveals something totally mind-blowing. Past examples of urbanism in the Amazon were more like groups of villages connected together, not quite what we'd call urban. You see, they were missing those fancy larger centers with their grand architecture and stuff. But guess what? Llanos de Mojos has got them. This place is the real deal when it comes to a fully urbanized Amazonian landscape. So, in the Llanos de Mojos region, a bunch of ancient settlements have been found. These were home to the Kasarabi people, who were all about hunting, fishing, and farming maize. We're talking about hundreds of sites, spread across 1,700 square miles. But these sites were so remote and hidden in the tropical forest that it was like trying to find a proverbial needle in a haystack. A team of archaeologists weren't going to let that stop them, though. They decided to take to the skies and use some fancy LiDAR mapping technology. Just imagine an aircraft flying over the area, shooting out a bunch of infrared beams. These beams hit the ground and bounce back, giving us the distance to different objects. It's like creating a super detailed map from above. Using computer software, these genius scientists were able to strip away the trees from the images, revealing the Earth's surface and all the ancient archaeological goodies hidden beneath. And boy, did they strike gold. They found a whopping 26 unique sites, including 11 that nobody even knew existed before. So what about these 26 super cool sites? Among them, we've got Landivar and Kotoka, which are like these huge urban centers. And get this, we already knew they existed, but the new maps revealed they cover 1.5 and 1/2 square miles respectively. These centers are surrounded by moat and rampart fortifications, like something out of a medieval castle, and they've got all sorts of crazy stuff inside. We're talking artificial terraces, massive earthen platform buildings, and pyramids that reach over 70 feet tall. All these epic buildings are actually facing the north-northwest. It's like they were trying to align themselves with the cosmos or something. This kind of cosmic worldview can be found in other ancient sites in the Amazon too. Now, let's take a bird's-eye view and strip away all those pesky trees. We can see these two centers in all their glory, and they're actually connected to a whole network of settlements through a bunch of causeways. Picture it like spokes on a wheel, stretching out for miles. Canals also stretch out from these main centers and connect to rivers and Laguna San Jose. It's like they had their own water delivery system going on. These ancient guys totally reshaped the whole landscape with their crazy cosmology. The only bummer is that their impressive architecture was made from mud brick. While it looked amazing back then, it just wasn't as durable as the limestone used by the Maya. What happened to the Kasarabi and their settlements is still a big mystery. But based on dating at the sites, it looked like they disappeared around 1400 CE, way before Europeans arrived in the Amazon. One theory is that a massive drought hit the region and messed everything up. The researchers found these massive water reservoirs at various sites, which is pretty interesting, considering how rainy the Amazon is known to be. Who knows if they were for drinking water or farming fish and turtles? But hey, severe droughts have happened in the past, and it only takes a couple of bad harvests to make people pack up and move on. What's even more interesting is that these communities thrived in the same area where this guy Fawcett we mentioned before went missing while searching for his lost city of Z. Maybe he was onto something after all. This is how it was. Fawcett stumbled upon this super cool document called Manuscript 512 at the National Library of Brazil. It's believed to have been written by a Portuguese explorer. Now, according to this document, back in 1753, a group of explorers discovered the remains of an ancient city. It had arches, a statue, and even a temple with hieroglyphs. But the document didn't spill the beans on where this city was located. So Fawcett got all hyped up about finding this city and made it his secondary mission after his main goal of finding something called Z. At one point, he had to come back to Britain to run some errands, but in 1920 he decided to give it another shot. Fawcett went on a personal expedition to find the city, but it was unsuccessful. 5 years later, Fawcett, his son Jack, and their buddy Raleigh Rimmel disappeared in the Mato Grosso jungle. Some researchers think that Fawcett might have been influenced by info he got from indigenous folks about this place called Kohikagu. Turns out Kohikagu was discovered by Westerners in 1925, and it had the ruins of 20 towns and villages. Up to 50,000 people might have lived there. And get this, the discovery of other earthworks in southern Amazonia totally supports Fawcett's theory. In 2005, an American journalist wrote an article about Fawcett's crazy expeditions and discoveries. He called it The Lost City of Z. Catchy, right? Well, in 2009, he turned that article into a book with the same name. And in 2016, the super talented writer-director James Gray made it into a movie. Now, here's where things get a bit sad. The Amazon region is changing rapidly. Farming, ranching, and energy production are changing this incredible place. And guess what? Those untouched areas with ancient relics won't stay untouched for long. It's a race against time to document and preserve what's left of our past before it's lost forever. When I say goth, I bet you immediately start thinking of dark clothes, edgy jewelry, maybe some tattoos, and dark dramatic makeup, right? Hey, that's my Christmas outfit! Just kidding. Anyway, ask Wednesday Addams, the Goth Queen, and she'll tell you that the word Goth originally referred to a nomadic Germanic tribe who fought against the Roman Empire. But here's the thing, that's actually how the meaning of the word as you know it today came into existence. So, let's go back in time to figure out how Goths, the ancient people of the North, ended up helping create the Gothic art and Gothic subculture. Our story begins in ancient Rome. You see, as the Roman Empire expanded and expanded more, it became inevitable that they faced raids and invasions from the people living along its borders. Among the most powerful of these people were the Goths. They were sometimes referred to as barbarians by the Romans, meaning foreign, crude, and uncivilized. Well, to the Romans maybe. Though when exactly they lived there is unknown. Some records suggest that Goths migrated from an island called Scandia, aka modern-day Scandinavia. It is after a series of migrations toward the south that they found themselves living close to the borders of the Roman Empire, which was, at the time, in control of most of Europe. They started fearing the threat that Rome and the Romans posed to their way of life. And that's how the centuries of aggression began between the Goths and the Roman Empire. It ultimately resulted in the Goths leaving the city of Rome, which marked the beginning of the medieval period in Europe. Goths were composed of two tribal groups, the Visigoths, the Goths of the West, and the Ostrogoths, the Goths of the East. As the Roman Empire split into the Western and Eastern Roman Empires, these two tribes played significant roles in its defense, as well as its internal power struggles. While some of the tribes remained enemies, also pronounced enemies of the Roman Empire, others were actually incorporated into its army. Now, this may come as a surprise, but most of what we know about Roman traditions today is all thanks to the Goths. Because rather than destroying and replacing it with their own, Goths preserved many aspects of Roman culture. Considering they're the ones bringing its end, this is a bit ironic, isn't it? With the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the classical period in Europe ended, and what many call the Dark Ages began. If you've been on a tour to Europe or you're interested in architecture, you've probably heard the term a Gothic structure, which was related to ancient Goths in a twisted way, because the funny thing is, it was originally used as an insult. Roman culture was never fully lost, but its influence declined over time. New art styles arose, which were more focused on symbolism and allegory, rather than proportion and realism. And during the Middle Ages, these new styles extended to architecture too. This new architectural style was characterized by tall, heavy, and imposing structures with pointed arches, flying buttresses, and large windows which made them look more skeletal and ornate. Rather than having sturdy walls and columns of the classical buildings, these structures had open and luminous interiors. Over time, many cathedrals and castles with such styles started to appear throughout Europe. The cathedral at Notre Dame is one of the best examples. But no fashion lasts forever. With the Italian Renaissance, the admiration for ancient Greece and Rome was renewed, so artists started to consider this pointed design crude and inferior in comparison. It was the Italian artist and writer Giorgio Vasari who used the term Gothic to describe this medieval style of architecture. He was one of those people who hoped to revive the architecture of the classical area, finding this new style crude and lacking any culture. So he actually used the word Gothic in a rude way, referring to the barbarians, aka the Goths, who he viewed as the ones to destroy the classical civilization and bring a dark and unenlightened time. Soon, the word Gothic started to be associated with darkness, superstition, and simplicity, and came to describe the whole medieval period overall. In the 1700s, the Enlightenment period began, and scientific reason and rationalism became the whole deal. However, not everyone was so enthusiastic about those. Romantic writers like Goethe and Byron wanted to take a break from these ways of thinking and living and started dreaming about the idealized versions of the past with natural landscapes and mysterious spiritual forces. It was the British Romantic author Horace Walpole who first applied the term Gothic to his 1764 novel, The Castle of Otranto. The fun fact is Walpole was so taken with Gothic architecture and art that he built a Gothic-style castle named Strawberry Hill House. That's why some people argue that he was the first modern-day Goth. So, the word Gothic emerged again in the form of a new literary movement this time, and the Gothic novel, which combined romance and dark elements to produce mystery, suspense, terror, horror, and the supernatural, rose in popularity. The typical settings where the stories usually took place were crumbling ruins, castles, gloomy cemeteries, and lonely and foggy roads. The characters usually consisted of cruel parents, sinister people of power, courageous heroes, and damsels in distress. Of course, there were supernatural figures and monsters of all kinds as well. The Gothic plots often combined horror and the supernatural with romance and heroism. terrifying things and events were mixed with captivating ones, as a salute to medieval architecture's combination of light and shadow. Famous Gothic novels include Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, Gaston Leroux's The Phantom of the Opera, and Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Most of Edgar Allan Poe's stories are written in the Gothic style as well. Another thing that's worth mentioning about Gothic literature is the fact that it paved the way for today's horror movies, detective fiction, psychological thrillers, and all things Tim Burton. The word Gothic continued to be used in literature and the movie industry until the 1970s, when the post-punk music scene emerged. The critic John Stickney was the first one to use goth for music. In 1967, he coined the term Gothic rock to describe one of the gigs of the rock band The Doors. However, he was not the only one to do so. Around the same time, Kurt Lodger, who was also a critic himself, described the Velvet Underground song All Tomorrow's Parties as a mesmerizing Gothic rock masterpiece. This way, a new era started. Only a couple of years later, many other bands like The Cure, Joy Division, Bauhaus, and the Banshees made goth music a thing of its own, also known as a new genre. They combined gloomy lyrics and the rather chaotic sound of punk with imagery inspired by the Victorian era, classic horror, and glam fashion. They took the dark clothes and piercings that previously belonged to the punk music scene, but they ditched its angry attitude. They were all about romance with everything dark and magic related. Eventually, Joy Division's manager described the band as Gothic. This helped solidify goth as a distinctive sound as well as an aesthetic. Against the 1980s pastel and neon pop culture, the goth scene stood its ground as a dark and moody alternative. After the music scene emerged, it was inevitable for goth to become a fashion statement too. Gothic fashion has dark, mysterious, and otherworldly features. Black clothing, dark makeup that is on the heavier side, exotic hair. Gothic clothing usually consists of black lace, black velvets, fishnets, and leather. A little bit of purple and red can be added to the mixture. There are many variations of Gothic fashion, from aristocratic or cyber goths to Victorian goths. There's even something called haute goth, which refers to the Gothic elements that are brought to runways. Despite all the prejudices that are surrounding the Goths, they are known for their culture of acceptance and embracing alternative lifestyles. And in return, this helps the Gothic aesthetic and culture to survive. So, we'll see if the word goth will soon be used to describe new things. In any case, one thing is sure to stay the same, and it's the Goths' culture's roots in the love of darkness. Ooh.
In 1928, Gloria Farley was a young girl with a big passion for exploration. She grew up in the town of Heavener, Oklahoma, and loved to visit local parks. One day, she found a weird-looking stone that had some bizarre symbols on it. Her fascination with the mysterious writings continued to grow. So, 2 decades later, she returned to study them and made a whole career out of it. See these weird drawings that Gloria stumbled upon back then? They're officially called runes, and they were a system of writing used by Vikings, an ancient Scandinavian people. The word rune itself translates to secret word or secret letter. Runes were made up of different symbols, each representing a different sound or concept. These symbols were carved into stone or wood and were often used for inscriptions and messages. As an important part of Viking culture, they were used everywhere, from spiritual texts to everyday communication. Why are these writings so interesting in the first place? Firstly, because there is no official text that explains the history or creation of the Viking runes. Some Vikings engraved runes onto the trunk of a tree named Yggdrasil. It was a mythical tree in Norse mythology. It was believed to connect the 9 realms of the universe. It's described as a huge ash tree with branches that reach out to all corners of the world. The tree is often depicted with 3 main roots, one on Earth, one more extending into the underworld, and the last one reaching the realm of spirits. It's a symbol of the connection between things and the cyclical nature of life. But this is just folklore. In reality, the origin of runes has not been officially determined yet. Many people even question whether Vikings originally used runes, mostly because they think Vikings acquired their knowledge of runes during their travels. We know that Vikings traveled to many different places throughout their history. They started in Scandinavia, then went on to visit the rest of Europe, including the British Isles, France, Germany, and Italy. Some even reached the northern parts of Africa and certain regions of Central Asia, going as far as the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. But there's another theory about Vikings and their travels that continues to baffle historians. Did Vikings actually discover America? Well, for starters, America was not discovered by anyone. The landmass of North and South America had been inhabited by indigenous peoples for thousands of years before the arrival of European explorers. But the first known European to reach the Americas was Christopher Columbus, who arrived at the Bahamas in 1492. So, why do some people believe Vikings might have gotten there first? We have to travel back to the 19th century, when the idea that the Norse were the first Europeans to discover America took off. This belief was based on runes and Norse artifacts found in different areas in the U.S. That cobblestone path, first discovered by Gloria Farley, located in Heavener Runestone Park in Oklahoma, seems to tell the same story. To this day, this slab is one of the biggest historical mysteries in the U.S. Some believe that the runes on the stone were carved by Norse explorers in 1000 CE. At one point in her career, Gloria even reached out to the Smithsonian Institution and found out that they had already concluded in 1923 that the symbols had indeed been from a Scandinavian language. They translated to Nomedal, or gnome and dal, which in turn translated to Sundial Valley, or Monument Valley. This information answered the question of what language the symbols belonged to, but left 2 other questions unanswered. Who carved the symbols, and when were they carved? During her professional life, Gloria collaborated with specialists in Norse history, geology, and epigraphy. She collected evidence that backed up her theory that Vikings had explored North America and could have easily navigated shallow rivers and creeks in their longboats. Though it may seem unlikely, it's not impossible that Vikings once sailed down the Mississippi River. In fact, Viking runestones have been found in various places all over North America, including Minnesota and Maine. In Oklahoma, researchers have discovered 6 of these runestones in total, though their validity is still uncertain. One Norse settlement, L'Anse aux Meadows in Canada, has been confirmed to date back to 1021 CE. This supports the idea of the Viking activity in North America during the estimated period of time of the Heavener runestone. The Heavener runestone's age cannot be determined through traditional scientific methods like carbon dating or organic material decay rate analysis. Therefore, researchers started to look for other evidence, like Viking artifacts or any other signs of their activity in the area. But none has been found to this day. That's why Vikings really visiting Oklahoma is a subject still up for debate. We can't finish our story about the Viking runes without mentioning the Futhark, which is a 16-letter alphabet. It was the basis for the earliest runic inscriptions that date back to around 200 BCE. At that time, the alphabet consisted of 24 letters. By 800 BCE, the number of letters was reduced to 16. The use of runes continued until the Middle Ages. Inscriptions on stone and wood were made with regular runes, while a different version of the alphabet was used for everyday messages on wood or bone. Runes were also commonly used on objects like combs to identify the owner. In the Viking culture, runes were used to honor brave fighters and heroes on memorial stones, such as the famous Jellingstone in Jutland, Denmark. These stones were placed in public areas for all to see and had a big impact on the local culture. Runes weren't the only interesting part of the Viking heritage. Contrary to popular belief, Vikings were actually known for their cleanliness. Excavations of Viking sites have revealed that they had access to grooming tools such as tweezers, razors, combs, and ear cleaners. Additionally, they were known to bathe regularly, often taking advantage of natural hot springs for their hygiene routine. This was in stark contrast to the hygiene habits of other Europeans at the time. They also had a knack for winter sports, which is not surprising given the Scandinavian weather. At least 6,000 years ago, Scandinavians created primitive skis, though it's believed that Asians may have invented them earlier. During the Viking Age, Norse people used skis for transportation and also for fun. They even had a spirit protector of skiing named Ullr, who was revered by Vikings. Vikings even had their own beauty standards, which were very important to them. Viking men who were not naturally blonde would use a strong soap with a high lye content to lighten their hair and conform to their culture's beauty standards. In some cases, beards were also lightened. These treatments may have also helped with another delicate issue of the time, that of head lice. Vikings were also known for their powerful ships, which were crucial to their expansion strategy. Their most commonly used boats were longboats, which could carry up to 60 people and were designed for easy docking and departure. Viking ships were typically made of wood, with the hull constructed using overlapping planks held together by iron rivets. The ships were powered by both sails and oars, and were often decorated with intricate carvings and animal figureheads. The reasons behind Vikings traveling almost everywhere in the world are not well understood. One theory suggests that their raiding trips were a result of limited opportunities in Scandinavia, including a lack of farmland and the practice of fathers leaving all their property to their oldest son. This left younger sons with no inheritance and no chance of finding land on their own, making them go on Viking explorations. Another theory is that there was an imbalance in the population of Scandinavia, with too many men and not enough women. This may have led Vikings to not only go searching for foreign treasures, but also to attract women as wives during their travels. You've probably heard about the Aztecs. They lived in central Mexico from the 14th to the 16th century. For almost 2 centuries, the Aztec Empire was a mighty power that conquered territories and developed agriculture and the economy. Knowing the full strength of this state, it's hard to believe that in Mexico, next to the Aztecs, there was a small tribe, the Purupechas, which the Aztecs couldn't conquer. But why? Let's first understand why the Aztecs were so strong. One of the main secrets of the Aztec power was the Valley of Mexico. Whoever owned this territory was in luck. Thing is, there's favorable soil in this valley, as well as many sources of fresh water. The Aztecs had never been hungry thanks to this rich land. Corn, beans, pumpkins, tomatoes, chili peppers, fruits, and berries, you name it. It was all there in unlimited quantities. On this land, the Aztecs practiced an unusual method of farming, chinampa. These were essentially floating islands on which people grew food. Large fresh lakes provided people with clean water all year round. An unlimited supply of food and water ensured a good quality of life. The natural resources helped them get more powerful. The Aztec army began to grow and conquer neighboring settlements, thanks to favorable living conditions. The Aztecs spent their time not only on the expansion of territories. They would give their people an education in homes and schools. People from wealthy families could study astronomy, philosophy, and history. Those who were less wealthy studied army affairs and handicraft work. Good education, discipline, and a rich harvest all year round. All this ensured the growth of the power of the Aztecs. They took over almost all the tribes in central Mexico in the 15th century, but not the Purépecha. This small state was formed in the 14th century. Some sources say they lived in South America, but then they immigrated to northern Mexico. But I guess we'll never know the truth. Still, they reportedly occupied the territory there, which is now the state of Michoacán. And there, for several decades, they founded their own empire, right in front of the Aztecs. Of course, this provoked prolonged and protracted conflicts. But the Aztecs never won these fights. The Purépecha continued to live and develop until the Spanish came to Mexico. The Purépecha alone could resist the Aztecs thanks to technology. They understood metalworking. They could melt and mix copper, bronze, and brass, and make high-precision labor tools such as shovels and axes. This technological advantage was one of the decisive factors in the conflict with the Aztecs. Another factor was the numerical advantage. During the 15th century, they had advanced technologies, a stable economy, a warm climate, and fertile lands. The population of their people was growing rapidly. And of course, for the Aztecs, it was a surprise. There are old records that talk about the attempts of the Aztecs to seize the territories of the Purépecha. When they came to the battlefield, they found huge armies of the enemy, exceeding twice the army of the Aztecs. It's unknown how the Purépecha would have developed further if the Spaniards hadn't come to them in the first half of the 16th century. Between 1521 and 1522, the Spaniards caught the ruler of the Purépecha and forced the empire to relinquish its power. In return, the Spaniards granted them autonomy and influence in the region. Also, they had one thing in common with the Spaniards. It was a conflict with one enemy, the Aztecs. The Purépecha continued to live as before and develop their culture. At the same time, they collaborated with the Spaniards, exchanging culture and traditions with them. The fall of the Purépecha had a lot to do with this collaboration. Spanish culture was integrated and then mixed with the Purépecha. The ancient traditions of the tribe were lost because of it. The greatness of the Purépecha might seem to have been forgotten. However, about 175,000 people are descendants of this tribe and speak its native language. It's also strange that in the state of Michoacán, there are large round pyramids made of volcanic stone, but few people know who they belong to. Many believe that all this is the heritage of the Aztecs or Mayans, but the pyramids are relics of the Purépecha. The decline of the Aztec Empire was much more painful, as they were in constant conflict with the Spaniards. But, as historic studies have shown, it wasn't an open confrontation with the colonizers that destroyed the Aztecs, but European diseases. Aztec immunity wasn't ready for infection, which played a crucial role in the fight against Spain. By the way, the Aztecs and the Purépecha had many things in common with the Maya. The territory of Mexico and Central America was called Mesoamerica until the 16th century. So, the Maya had been the most dominant people here for almost 2,000 years. You've probably heard something about them or seen them in some movies. The famous Mayan calendar, pyramids, and things like that. But your expectations about this civilization may be wrong. It was a big state with laws, stone cities, and scientific discoveries. This empire was born and appeared around 1800 BCE and reached its peak in the 6th century. But then, something inexplicable happened to one of the most advanced civilizations on our planet. Unlike the Aztecs, scientists still can't explain what caused the decline of the Maya civilization. Let's try to figure it out for ourselves. The Maya Empire was located on the territory of modern Guatemala. Even at the dawn of this state, people were engaged in agriculture, growing corn, zucchini, and beans. Then they began to explore the mountainous terrain and build architectural monuments. They learned how to handle stone and began to raise their famous pyramids. Maya's influence was expanding. They made about 40 cities, and from 5 to 50,000 people lived in each. Every town was surrounded by plowed fields and fertile gardens. The entire Maya culture was supported by agriculture. At its peak, the Maya Empire numbered around 10 million people. Along with the population, scientific progress also grew. The Maya invented many smart things, but their most famous calendar had a complex computing system and counted the days 5,000 years ahead. They also developed a complex writing system that scientists could decipher only in the 20th century. And the Maya were the first to come up with the idea of using cocoa beans to eat. Technically, they created chocolate. But then, something happened to this powerful civilization. In the 8th century, cities in the southern regions began to empty. By 900 CE, the decline of the Maya civilization began. In the 10th century, they completely stopped building anything out of stone. No one knows exactly why, but scientists have several ideas. The most popular one says that the Maya had exhausted all their natural resources. 10 million people aren't that much now, but it was about 5% of Earth's total population at that time. The nature of Mesoamerica couldn't feed so many people. Perhaps the harvest crisis began and ruined the economy of all cities. Another version says the Maya ruined themselves because of the struggle for power. Conflicts and fights in such a gigantic civilization could tear the empire apart from the inside. The rulers of some cities united to capture others. Perhaps the heirs of the ruling dynasty fought for the throne. But the main version involves weather changes. Long drought could destroy entire crops and dry up all lakes with fresh water. Perhaps there was no rain for several years, and the Maya couldn't support life in large cities. People abandoned their homes and split up all over Mesoamerica with other local tribes. Then, foreign conquerors came to the territory of the Maya Empire, and their traditions mixed with different cultures. Today, several million descendants of the Maya live in Central America. About 40% of the population of Guatemala belongs to these people.
The history of labyrinths is a lot more fascinating than you'd imagine. These captivating structures, far older and more enchanting than the traditional mazes we all know, have been weaving their way through human history for over 4,000 years, and they're found sprinkled across the globe in different shapes and sizes. For starters, let's make sure we're using the terminology correctly. A maze and a labyrinth are two distinct structures often confused with each other. The primary difference lies in their design and purpose. A maze is a complex network of interconnected pathways, featuring multiple intersections, dead ends, and choices, making it challenging to find the correct route from the entrance to the exit. Mazes are created to perplex and confuse participants, often requiring trial and error to solve. On the other hand, a labyrinth is a single, non-branching path that leads from the entrance to the center and then back out. Unlike a maze, there are no intersections or dead ends in a labyrinth. The path may twist and turn, creating a winding journey, but it is continuous, meaning it has only one route to the center and one route back out. Labyrinths serve meditative, spiritual, or calming purposes, and are often found in various cultures and religious traditions. Now, let's get back to history. Sure, those hedge mazes we all know, like the one in Hampton Court, are cool. But did you know they're actually just youngsters in the timeline of mazes? They started popping up in the gardens of the rich and royal folks in Europe only about 600 years ago. On the other hand, labyrinths, with their single twisted, meandering path from the start to the finish, have been around for millennia. Right from the ancient times to our fast-paced modern age, these intricate patterns have been inscribed on rocks, painted on walls, or simply traced in the dirt under our feet. They've been a source of amusement, a tool for introspection, and a symbol of spiritual journey. The common classical and medieval designs of labyrinths are crowd favorites, largely for their aesthetic balance of complexity and compactness. Labyrinths don't really play mind games with you. There are no forks in the path to confuse you. Instead, you're invited to simply step in and trust the path to guide you to your goal. Let's take a step back in time to look at the early versions of labyrinths. Neolithic and Bronze Age folks etched these symbols on rocks and pottery, although pinpointing their exact age can be a bit tricky. Similar designs were found on ancient Cretan coins, signifying the famed Labyrinth of Knossos. If that doesn't sound familiar, know that it's connected to a famous ancient tale from Greek mythology, the myth of the Minotaur. It centers around King Minos of Crete and a monstrous creature with a human body and a bull's head. It begins with a terrible curse that affected Minos and his kingdom after he angered Poseidon, the powerful spirit of the sea. You don't want to do that. In his wrath, Poseidon introduced into Minos' household a monstrous creature, half human, half bull, known as the Minotaur. Fearing the beast's uncontrollable and savage nature, Minos commissioned the brilliant architect Daedalus to design and construct an intricate labyrinth beneath his palace in Knossos to imprison the Minotaur. To ensure the Minotaur remained fed, Minos imposed a dreadful tribute on the city of Athens. The third time this tribute was due, the Athenian hero Theseus decided to take matters into his own hands. He volunteered as one of the tributes and sailed to Crete. Upon arriving in Crete, he was given a crucial device, a magical thread that he could unravel while navigating the labyrinth, ensuring he could find his way back after confronting the Minotaur. In the heart of the labyrinth, Theseus encountered the terrifying creature and, using his wit and strength, managed to defeat it. Following the thread, he safely made his way out of the maze and fled. But was this famous labyrinth real? It might have been. Picture this, an expansive maze of underground tunnels, stretching on for nearly 3 miles beneath a stone quarry. This is not just any stone quarry. It's situated on the picturesque Greek island of Crete. Some folks are beginning to think this may have been the real spot for the legendary labyrinth. Now, I know what you're thinking. No, I don't. Anyway, what about the Minoan Palace at Knossos? That place, just 20 miles away, has, for the longest time, been pegged as the home of the labyrinth, thanks to some pretty influential voices. For more than a century, ever since the British archaeologist Arthur Evans started digging around Knossos, this has been the accepted narrative. Mr. Evans was pretty successful in selling this idea to the world. However, some other scholars are beginning to view this new location as a potentially equally valid spot for the mythical maze. And you've got to admit, the complex network of interlocking tunnels, including larger spaces, does give off a pretty strong labyrinth vibe. However, since the rediscovery of Knossos in the late 19th century, this site has been largely ignored by those seeking out the mythical maze. It was even used as a storage place at one point in history. Of course, we're slipping past the more important question, well, I think so, of whether there actually was a creature which was part man and part bull. Now, I think it's possible, especially since I run into folks all the time who are full of bull. Legends aside, if we fast forward to the Roman Empire, we'll find labyrinths decorating mosaic floors, providing a playground for children, or serving as a training ground for knights to hone their skills. In the medieval era, labyrinth designs became even more intricate, reflecting the complex philosophical and spiritual views of the time. These were engraved in manuscripts or elegantly laid out in marble and tiles on floors for important constructions. The Chartres Cathedral Labyrinth, built in the early 13th century, still welcomes visitors today. From the late medieval period, labyrinths started popping up on village greens and hilltops in Britain and Germany. Even Shakespeare mentioned them in A Midsummer Night's Dream. These labyrinths, where villagers danced during rustic festivities, are now rare, with only a few remaining in England and Germany. Similarly, rock labyrinths on remote Scandinavian islands, tied to the superstitious practices of medieval folk, add another fascinating chapter to our labyrinthine history. The story gets even more intriguing when we find labyrinths in places like India, Sumatra, Java, and even among the rock art of the American Southwest. The questions of how and when these patterns reach these far-flung locations are still enigmas. By the 19th century, people had spread labyrinths and mazes to all corners of the world, and they evolved to become the fun, family-oriented attractions we know today. In the late 20th century, labyrinths experienced a resurgence as a new generation began to appreciate their historic and spiritual significance. These age-old designs, with their twisty paths inevitably leading to a central goal, invite us for both fun exploration and deep contemplation. As for their purpose, back in the day, labyrinths had some pretty interesting uses. They might have been used as traps for those nasty spirits that folks didn't want hanging around, or maybe as dance floors for special ceremonies. Researchers also found that labyrinths could have many meanings, like a roadmap to a revered ancestor's home, or even a symbolic representation of that ancestor. They found that for some indigenous communities, a labyrinth was a really important symbol, like a lucky charm. Labyrinths can also represent a spiritual journey. As folks walk the winding paths, they might feel like they're getting closer to some sort of enlightenment. Lately, lots of labyrinths have been popping up in places like hospitals and parks. They're often used as a sort of meditative tool. As you wander around, you lose yourself in the twists and turns, forgetting about the outside world, and it helps to quiet down all the noise in your head. Switching gears a bit, labyrinths and mazes have also found a home in the world of video games. Take the 1994 game Marathon, for instance. It was packed with all these maze-like passages that players had to find their way through. Labyrinths don't just stop at video games. They've inspired a bunch of films, games, and music too. A pretty avant-garde film called In the Labyrinth uses a symbolic modern labyrinth as a metaphor for the search for meaning. There's also a highly praised film called Pan's Labyrinth,